Welcome wherever you're joining from. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Robb, the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be your host for the next 2.5 hours. We have an action-packed program. We are recording for those of you that may need to duck off at some stage. We are live streaming on the MPW Facebook page and YouTube channel, so you can pick it up there if you need to as well. And we're also, thanks to Julia Cui and her team, live streaming into China. We have a number of decks tonight, and we will be making those available for you. Let me take a few minutes to give you our program. We have an amazing group of speakers tonight. As soon as I finish the intro, we will be having our first panel, which is finding the signs to make practical sense of the AI explosion. We will then move on to a presentation, Sports for People and Planet, a World Economic Forum report. We then have a really exciting segment, RunX at the Convergence of Running, Fitness and Digital Engagement. That's a World Athletics and Techno Gym initiative that was launched this week. We then have a short segment called Inclusivity and Technology, a fascinating segment this, wheelchairs, prostheses and the One Shoe campaign. Really looking forward to getting the insights from that. And then a session called Following the Capital, Investment Trends Shaping Running. We then come on to a presentation, a really exciting one, and I'm going to introduce the speakers as they come in, so I haven't named them all now, but hugely honored to have Bill Quinn, the futurist from TCS, looking down the road, the future of AI and tech in road races. And then we're going to pretty much wrap it up, harking back to London and that incredible day we had in London. I was very fortunate to be on the finish line. When plans gel perfectly, how nutrition fueled Sawe's sub 2 hour marathon, And then if you're still with us, I'll come back and wrap that all up after 2.5 hours. But let's get underway with our first segment, and I'm delighted to be joined by 4 founders and CEOs, starting with Cade, who is the founder and CEO of Neurun. Welcome, Cade. Great to see you. We have Bob Bickel, who I mentioned is taking time out from shucking oysters in Maine. He's the founder and CEO of RunSignup. Welcome, Bob. Great to see you. And we have Sam Browne, who's the co-founder and CEO of Let's Do This. And maybe just set the scene a little bit. I think amazing times around AI, dominating conversations wherever you go. There can't be a day that goes by unless you're hiding under a rock somewhere where people aren't speaking about AI across every industry, and clearly sport generally and the mass participation industry is absolutely no exception. Some people see this as the greatest opportunity, but I think there's lots of people that are really struggling to come to terms with, what a genuine opportunity, what's the hype. So specifically the title we've come up with is Finding the Signs to Make Practical Sense of the AI Explosion. And we're going to really focus on trying to help organizers identify the signs that matter, understand what's already happening today, but also explore the future, what it might look like for events, what it might look like for participants and the broader industry. And I guess we kick that sort of narrative off with, and we're going to break the panel into 4 different segments. But first, I'd just like to kind of drill down a little bit. What's real? What's the hype? Where's measurable value being created? What are the capabilities maybe that organizers might be underestimating? What foundations maybe need to be in place before organizations can truly benefit from AI? And Cade, if I may, I'd love to come to you first and say, right now there's probably quite a lot of pressure on organizations as they wrestle with developing an AI strategy. And from that perspective, what do you think might be the biggest misconception that organizers have when they're thinking about AI at this stage?
Hi, Chris. Great question. And hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Cade. I'm the founder and CEO of Neurun, and we create spatially aware digital brains for our race events. And we're working with major events around the world with TCS and even outside the industry with the World Cup and the LA 28 Olympics. And what we're finding, there's a lot of excitement in AI, right? There's a lot of fear as well. You see all these headlines and you figure that you have to do something with AI. And what we're recommending and what we're seeing with event organizers is that before you get really excited about all the possibilities with AI, you need to do a data audit first. understanding what data that you already have, what data is organized already, what data needs to be organized, and what data you might want to go and get in order to take advantage of all these new AI capabilities coming out. So no matter you're going to be as an event organizer, you'll be exposed to a lot of new AI technologies. This industry is compounding fast. And so when we look at like a data audit, what we're finding is, event organizers are working with, they have with their website information, PDFs, a lot of it sometimes can be outdated. There can be conflicting information on your website as well. And so first figuring out, okay, how do we make sure all of our website information is up to date and correct? The second one is we are helping advise events to understand what information they might be missing. What we're finding is a lot of event organizers are missing valuable spectator information, where there might be like I know, I'm sure a lot of us have been at a major event and we don't know where we can cross the street because there's not information about crossover points for spectators. So not neglecting like these large audience engaging with your event during race day is very important. You have volunteer information. How do you consolidate that information, make that accessible? Let's see, there's the partner info, like what information can you gather from your partners in order to make that accessible as well to your participants. And so, the recommendation I give typically is first do a data audit and organize your data so that you can then take advantage of all the new AI possibilities, because without good data, you're going to get terrible AI experiences.
Thanks, Wade. So clear on the data, good audit before you start moving forward with any strategy. Bob, let's come to you. Once you've got that in place, I see quite a lot of chat around generating content and answering questions, but surely it must go a lot deeper than that. What are some of the tangible operational benefits that you're seeing?
Probably the number one that we've seen is basically Cade provides this as well, which is basically an AI chatbot on your event website, so that you're offloading customer service questions. So we have about 1,500 of our customers that are using that out of the 40,000 that we have today. And we're seeing about 10,000 requests per month, just to put it in some hard numbers here. We're getting extraordinarily good customer feedback from that. An example would be a 14,000 person turkey trot did about 1,300 requests that came through that channel. So they noticeably lowered their email and phone customer service overhead. I'd say the second one is for directors in terms of planning and so forth. Probably the most tangible set of things that people have done with kind of like AI modeling is to optimize their pricing and schedule for price increases and things like that. And kind of comparing that with industry standards of how many price increases to have, what the average prices are, and things like that we publish, of course. And then kind of correlated to that, events that are selling out, there's a bunch of different mechanisms and knobs that you can adjust to optimize the amount of revenue that you can generate from that. So, like if I sign up for a marathon and I get injured, I want to exit out. Do I get a full refund or partial refund? And then how does the next person on the wait list kind of automatically get invited and sign up, and what's the price that they pay and things like that? So AI is useful for pricing type of modeling types of projects like that. Those are the two that we've seen with the most.
Interesting. So pricing, modeling, better utilization of resources, making it easier for call centers in terms of the amount of call centers, as in maybe email centers mostly these days, but responding to participant inquiries.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bob. So Sam, let's come along to you and maybe step back 12 months and look at some of the things that Cade has shared, some of the things that Bob has shared. This fast progress. What's really surprised you of how far this has come in 12 months? If you were sitting there 12 months ago, I think the number that you gave there, Bob, was 1,500 out of 40,000 events are using the chatbot. So the opportunity for better adoption, moving faster. Talk about that a little bit, if you would, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Let's Do This. We're a global AI registration platform operating the technology for people like London Marathon, Nike After Dark Tour, and then excitingly starting with the Bank of America Chicago Marathon this year. I think the first thing to say is that it has been overwhelming. And if everyone on this call is feeling overwhelmed by it, we all are. Like, our first big institutional investor was Sam Altman through YC back in 2018, and we were sort of watching him build OpenAI through at that stage. And even talking to Sam and team now, like, they're feeling overwhelmed if you're inside OpenAI or Anthropic. So if you're feeling like you're behind and you don't really know what's going on, like, everyone is feeling like that. So the first thing is just to not be super self-judgmental of what's there. In the last 12 months, the big thing has been agents. So moving from these simple chat interfaces into agents. And what we mean by agents is things that can do. So rather than just giving you one response, they can go and basically make multiple calls to be able to go and carry out actions and workflows. But I think the biggest thing that has surprised me is how much this is a human problem now, less than a technology problem. For our industry, the technology is good enough. Like, it is the organizers that we're seeing doing incredibly well now are the organizations that are adopting this and rewiring their organizations. And it is a time for radical leadership. I think you're going to talk about London Marathon at the end. And obviously we had an amazing, 1.3 million people in that ballot again. And the level to which that team has tried to adopt quickly has been huge. And that only starts if you really make it a priority at the top of the company. So I think it's very important that what we've seen from the most successful over the last 12 months is the organizations that have a clear AI strategy. In events, we're constantly struggling between the urgent and the important. Like, we always have more things to do in a day than we can possibly do. And if there's one thing we've seen with the people who have been most successful, it's to get starting and get going, because this is the biggest shift that is going to happen in any of our businesses in the next 10 years. And even if you don't know what the strategy should be, just making it a core, big deliverable for your organization this year, that you are going to move the organization towards being more AI native, is where we've seen the most successful organizers in the last 12 months.
Thank you, Sam. So everyone's feeling overwhelmed from the top to the bottom, and bite the bullet, move forward, have a strategy. Tying back to, I guess, what Cade said, if you've done your data audit, then play that into a strategy. You mentioned London and that huge success of 1.3 million. Let's use that as a segue. 1.3 million signed up in the ballot. But what about the future now of participants? What is it that they're going to be expecting? What role will AI agents play in this? And maybe start off with you, Cade, as many organizers still maybe thinking website, apps, FAQs. What are they missing? What are the participant expectations going to be as they evolve over the next months and years? Is it going to still be around that, or what will their expectations be, putting ourselves in the shoes of our participants?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that Google's particularly interested in as well. We work closely with Google around the world, and we have been conducting research studies on this very topic. And what we're finding is it'll go from just, finding basic information, but this is really a spatial information problem as well. As AI enters the real world, AI is looking for verified information. Event organizers can provide that verified real world information. Participants will want, what we see is that participants will want an AI that understands, like, who they are, what they intend to do, where they are, and how to get there. So an AI that's with you in real time that can help you navigate an event expo and race weekend. And so you need an AI that understands as much information of the spatial information of the event. So this goes back to the data audit as well of, okay, you have the event website information, but do you have detailed information about the expo setup, or what things are happening with your partners during race weekend. For Boston Marathon, there's a lot of things happening on Newbury Street as an example as well. All the information happening during your race weekend becomes very valuable as participants expect the AI to be able to answer things in real time, and also based off of information that comes up in real time as well that you might not be able to update on your website in time, but an AI will understand some of those changes happening along the course or during race weekend. So yeah, spatially aware AI is going to be something that most participants come to expect at events. And so it's up to event organizers to look at what information they can provide of like a digital map, a digital layout of everything they have.
And so picking up on that opportunity, I'm assuming to go way beyond just the race course and the start and finish, this opportunity to really integrate with the city, to have that city-wide experience for fans to be able to understand that, even to the extent of, road closures. How often do you go to an event and you get in a taxi and you get stuck in road closures because the taxis aren't aware of it? But as an event organizer, being able to share your road closure plans, I'm guessing it can go as far as that in terms of creating an impact on the participant experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice stuff. Sam, let's go on to you. And again, picking up on that theme of moving fast, step ahead 3 years, maybe 5 years. What are participants looking for at that stage? Big, bold predictions.
Yeah, so I think essentially all of this discovery will collapse behind the agent. So the same level where we're going and searching through websites and Google and that kind of stuff will go away. And indeed, we had sort of two areas of the business 2 years ago. We had the search and listings discovery side of the business, and we had this core registration and AI services to organize side of the business. And we saw the discovery side of the business just very early, like we are definitely early, but we could just see that the better the agents got and the more context your agent has about you, the less you need to go and browse. And the expectation from participants will become that their agent is surfacing them the race that fits in with their body and their human and everything else to go and do. And then these registration forms will collapse from whatever 12 field, 4 pages, whatever they are, to a 1-line confirmation where it will just be, great, you're in, you're signed up, this is done. And I think the other thing I would say around how this goes through and people think about it is that I think keyboards will start going away. Like, this is going to take longer than 3 to 5 years. But keyboards are super inefficient ways of us trying to enter information into a machine. You go into the Let's Do This office now and everyone is just speaking into their microphones, as far as like voice is just a much better way of communicating with agents than these keyboards are. And so when we think about how discovery and entry is going to happen, in 3 to 5 years, it's not like 100% of this is going to be agentic. As I say, it's a human adoption problem as much as a technology problem. We can do the technology now. It will take time, but you will be seeing large numbers coming through from agents rather than sort of through sort of standard discovery. And I think that's why we think marketing will go and become agentic. We have invested a lot into our experience agent, which, yes, now does all your customer service and answers your emails and manages sort of auto resolves about 90% of all the CS now, whether you're with Let's Do This or whether you're with another platform. But really, we see that as becoming the marketing of the future, because it won't be these like big blast emails that you're trying to find segments into. It'll be individualized agents communicating with our participants, probably on WhatsApp and Messenger and iMessage as much as through email. And so that is going to shift radically. But it also is going to shift varying on how quickly the organizers are adopting this stuff, because there will still be a lot of organizers in 5 years that are just relying on emails everywhere and their websites and Google and search and discovery. But those organizers that are actually thinking about how this search and discovery becomes around the agents they control will be growing much, much faster. And we're already seeing that.
Wow,
Chris,
fascinating.
can I add one thing to Chris? Can I add one comment on what Sam said as well?
Yeah.
Talking about search, it's going to go right now. AI is reactive. The participant surfaces their pain point. You wait for the AI to respond, and then you get your answer. To Sam's point about search changing, AI will become proactive and be able to understand who you are, what you're trying to do, and surface everything you need so that you don't have to think about that in order to maximize your event experience. So that's what event organizers need to prepare for as well, on top of what Sam said.
Yeah, amazing. I was talking to Bang Trin, who many of you know, my partner in Vietnam, and he was sharing that just a couple of days ago he said something like "good night" and "thank you" to his agent, and the agent came back with a whole bunch of "just want to let you know what's happened this week. Here's this. I've tracked this, and you know how amazing it's becoming responsive. Thanks for that, Bob. Bob, let's come back to you. You jokingly said at the top of the show when we're in the green room that and I've mentioned Maine and shucking oysters already, but you said when AI takes your job, you're going to spend more time with your granddaughter up there shucking oysters. What does that mean for the registration industry as we become more agentic in terms of participants using agents to come and register? How is that going to evolve? What is the impact going to be? How do organizers start to think ahead towards that?
Well, I think I'd like to start by saying it's tough to change people's habits quickly, right? I will agree with Sam in the sense that things are growing quickly. I grabbed a couple of quick stats. So from March to May, the amount of traffic coming to our website, our customers' websites, grew. That was coming from AI. And AI is a funky thing to measure because you can't measure it exactly, but it grew 40 to 60% depending on your measurement of page views or like multi-step sessions. So the growth is there. On the other hand, Google search is still 100 times larger than ChatGPT, which is the primary AI. Why AI is tough to measure is you can't really measure it coming from Claude Desktop, Claude Cowork, and you can't really measure. Google actually blends their search and their Gemini searches together. So the number might be a little bit low, but 100x is still pretty substantial. The other thing about web and mobile is that it's a very rich experience. And you can see this kind of in two directions. So one is that OpenAI for a while tried to create their own browser. Perplexity has had some amount of success with their own browser. But you see, like OpenAI, you can develop apps now that actually kind of open up an iframe in the chat session. So I think that, like the chat interface that we see today, and the agent that I think most people are exposed to is just ChatGPT starts to know them when they're using ChatGPT. That will mature in terms of the user interface to kind of include the web sites that people have. Actually, one of the coolest things that you can do out there is get Claude Cowork and get the browser extension and develop your own little agents. It's the easiest way to go about doing something. And I was listening to a podcast from Patrick Collison, the Stripe founder, and he was talking about how headless browsers is a really important part of how AI discovers things and how AI interacts. And it's one of the things that we've kind of focused on in previous years is accessibility for blind or people that have vision problems, and the fact that our interfaces are kind of accessible so that AI can read them, just like humans that have vision problems can read them. I think that what Sam's vision of the AI kind of making the registration a lot faster is definitely true, right? So AI will know your date of birth. It will know, your emergency contact. It will know your t-shirt preference. It will, just like Apple, it'll be like buying a ticket with Apple Pay. So like if you buy a ticket with Apple Pay, you don't really need to identify yourself because Apple Pay will transfer that information to the ticket vendor. So it will become a lot more convenient. But I do think that a user will not trust their agent completely to sign them up for the Scott Coffee 8K. they will want to look at a website. They'll want to see video. They'll want to see pictures. They'll want to see, what the race is about. They'll want to know if they can bring a stroller so their granddaughter can shuck while you're running. So yeah, that sort of thing. So anyway, those are the random thoughts that come to my head.
Some great thoughts. I see Sam and Cade nodding away there, and I want to maybe kind of use a bit of a segue to go into business models and how do we generate new revenues, and how there's parts of the industry that are looking for ways to become more commercially sustainable. What do we think some of the opportunities are? Right now we're seeing talk around efficiency and content creation and those kind of things. But are there new revenue models that AI is potentially going to bring to the industry? Let's throw that to you, Sam.
Yeah, 100%. And Michael Sheehan said in the chat, AI certainly frees up bandwidth. The question is what we choose to do with it. And I think that's such a key question. So definitely cost saving by definition, there's a limit to it as far as you can't say more than 100% of costs. And so it does reduce over time, whereas revenue growth can be exponential. If you can just consistently be adding these opportunities, revenue growth, that's definitely there. We focus on a pretty simple playbook with organizers, which is, yes, use AI to drive efficiency, but then go through these 2 steps. Step 1 is get to scarcity, try and break through where you have a really hot golden ticket. That's obviously what we've worked really hard with on the London Marathon ballot and the Great North Run ballot and a bunch of those other ballots. And then step 2 is blend out your revenue. So with lots of organizers now, we see 95% of their revenue coming from registrations. Whereas at scale, organizers tend to see kind of 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% between registrations, membership, subscriptions, partners, sponsors, charities, and merchandise. And the challenge pre-AI has been it's only been organizations like World Marathon Majors that can have these big commercial teams, they can have these big contracting teams to be able to scale out and launch things like memberships and things like sponsorships. Whereas I think what we'll see is that there's this huge amount of untapped value in the wider endurance industry outside the majors. If you look at the cost brands are spending on building their own races, look, we do a load of all the events for Nike After Dark and a bunch of other brands, or you look at what they're willing to spend on a major, it is literally 100x what they can spend with any other race, basically. And with any other race, they can get access to not having their brand diluted hugely everywhere. They can get much deeper relationships with the runners. And I think what we'll see is this focus on the sponsorship and commercial side to be able to allow brands to access more things at more scale, because right now there's a real challenge for organizations to be able to put together the decks and meet the people and do the things that you need to be able to do. There's this absolute treasure trove of data that the organizers have, and having this conversation where they can really be talking to these people there. And so we do see that there will be this big shift towards more sponsorship, more brand deals, more memberships, more other revenue drivers outside just the specific organizer than what's been before. And the final thing on this is more races. I think you're seeing a lot of organizers, most of the big ones we're working with, are putting on new races for the same level of headcount. And it's extraordinary. Take an example like Boulderthon, who are doing pretty much 20,000 registrations with one single team. So that's the other thing we'll see, is just many more races coming through as well. So a lot of hope for revenue growth.
Thank you, Sam. We got about 5 minutes left. Let's throw the commercial one to Bob and Cade, and then I'm going to just come back with one final question for you in terms of what organizers should be looking out for in the next 6 months. But we got 5 minutes to get that all happening, so fairly lightning round. Cade, let's come to you on the commercial opportunity.
Make everything happen for what Sam just said, the key is for an event to own their digital communication channel. Google is going to be able to tag most things on websites, and most people will go to Google and ChatGPT over time. So it's you have to think of from your event perspective, how do I own my communication channel so I have that direct keep that engagement with participants so that you can collect valuable data for your brands, but also for your local city government. So if you can, the more you can capture of what people are doing during race weekend and during your race, the more data you can then apply. There's a lot of AI tools to do data reports and really cool data visualizations that can be used for getting your permit the next year, for packaging much better, richer reports for your sponsors and your partners so they want to continue to engage with you year after year. So yeah, that's my quick response on that front.
The power of data, the ongoing engagement, helping with permits and the like. Thank you. Bob, let's come to you on the commercial question.
I'll take a little bit different angle here. I think there's a great opportunity for AI DIY, do it yourself. Vibe coding is increasingly easy and powerful to do. We're seeing like a lot of our customers actually vibe code applications on top of the data platform that we provide in the APIs and in the not too distant future MCPs that we provide. We also see some early adopters actually developing their own website and registration capabilities. And that's primarily today led by a technology itch that they have to try this and play with it. And I think it's going to bring kind of price compression in our business. So that's our expectation. And what's incumbent upon us is to make sure that we use AI effectively to kind of stay ahead of our customers, provide more value, but also to make sure that we run an efficient operation, because I think that there's going to be compression in the margins for race registration companies like ourselves and SAMs.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on that, because I think there's maybe some uninitiated on the call that might be saying, what is vibe coding? In 30 seconds, just give a quick snapshot of what vibe coding is, please.
Oh, there's tools out there like V0 or Claude Code, Lovable, that you can very quickly just talk to the AI and the AI will write the code. The challenge with that, of course, is that it might not be quality code, and that once you start getting down the path and it gets a little complicated, tracking down bugs and security risks and things like that becomes a challenge. So we don't see, quick.
Great, thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left, so about 30 seconds each, please. If you're sitting in the organizer's space, what in the next 6 months should they really focus on? Let's start with you, Sam, then go to Cade and finish up with Bob.
Yeah, I think get going with something live in production. So we have a end-to-end customer service agent experience that we now open source for anyone. You can get onto it within a couple of days. My email is sam@letsdothis.com. The reason I say that is because we want people to be able to experience the value of AI. Companies like Cade, Bob's, and mine are all seeing this in our everyday. But right now, inside organizers, it's hard to do that. So yeah, if you want 90% of your customer service across email and agents and whatever to be resolved, ping us an email and we'll get you going on that. And that will then show the rest of the org like what is possible for you to do more complicated things.
Thank you. Cade?
It all comes back down to doing the data audit. The better data that you have and you're able to collect, it will allow you to use many free tools that are out there to create cool experiences for your team, for your community to leverage the event data as well for their own vibe coding projects. And for companies like ours and Bob's and Sam's, the better data that you have, the better experiences that we can provide you going forward.
Thank you, Cade. Last word to you, Bob.
Yeah, what the other guy said, start playing with it, get some experience with it. I will add this, that fundamentally the endurance business is not a technology business. It's a human business. It's the effort that you put in training. It's the effort that you put in to go and experience the race. It's the type of experience that you provide people, and don't overemphasize the AI stuff. Like, AI is very important to a company like ours, because we need to develop technology, and that has the biggest impact to us. But make sure you keep it real too.
What a great point! What a great point to end. And interestingly, all this fear around it, all the overwhelm. Some of you might have seen there was a piece that was put out by JP Morgan a couple of days ago, talking about sport as an asset class and recognizing that the more AI grows, the more there's going to be this desire for human connection, and clearly mass participation is at the core of this. So the opportunities to be able to leverage AI to create better human experiences. So let me just wrap that up. Get going, get your data audit, start playing with it, and recognize that at the end of the day, the human part of it is so crucial. We could have gone on for an hour. There's a couple of questions in the chat. There's one there from Steve Fleck. Cade, it's more about your FIFA thing. I'll let you guys take that offline. But thank you so much. Really, really great to have you with us, Bob, Sam, and Cade. Cade, I know you're off to do a ribbon cutting for the FIFA World Cup in New York, and you got to scramble. So thanks for making the time. Thanks all of you, and we'll move on to the next segment. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. As we move on to our next segment, which is a presentation which I'm really excited to see. This has been out for a while now, but we're going to get a summary of a hugely informative presentation. It's called Sports for People and Planet, presented at the World Economic Forum. Delighted to welcome Emma Mason, the CEO of the World Federation of Sporting Goods Industry, WFSGI, an old friend of World Athletics and MPW. So wonderful to see you, Emma. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you. And joining Emma is Tony Simpson, who's a partner at Oliver Wyman, who was very instrumental in driving the report. Tony, great to see you. Welcome. So you should have sharing rights there, Tony. If you'd like to jump in, I'm going to sit in the background and let you and Emma take it forward for the next 30 minutes or so.
Yes. So look, what I'm going to present to you is what was presented at the World Economic Forum in 2026, it's January. It was actually an hour presentation. You'll be pleased to know I'm going to condense it down into 15 minutes, and then Emma and I will discuss some of the elements of this we think are relevant to this group. But I just wanted to give you a sense of why this was done and what it was. So this report, as Chris said, had quite a lot of attraction and quite a lot of chatter about it for two reasons. One is it was the first time that anybody had actually ever scoped what and defined the global sports economy. For many years, people looked at professional sports, and around that, some of the adjacencies in terms of participation, and also in terms of some of the other areas in sporting goods. But nobody actually put the whole thing together as a group. And so what we did, we used 125 organizations were involved. There were 22 big data sets involved as well. It was 14 months of work. I measured there were 5,000 person hours involved in the team running this. And we used distinct sources. So we made sure that all the data were triangulated. Then on top of that, we convened both, and you can see in Berlin, Hong Kong and London, with groups of people representing these stakeholder groups, what we consider the new sports economy. And these included governments, as well as athletes themselves, more importantly, the financial services industry, and the people we touched on JP Morgan saying it's an asset class. We involved that group as well. And then put together a report which was 13,000 words. I can assure you it could have been 50,000. But the key numbers to come out, and the key thing I wanted to focus on today, was it was a $2.3 trillion industry. And when you look at that, and we look at what's going on in America as from next week, to give you a sense of perspective, the GDP of Canada is 2.4 trillion, and the GDP of Mexico is 2.1. So it's non-trivial and it is big. But the issue in sport was it was operating in silos and not operating properly. And the other thing that really surprised us, and we kept rechecking the data, was professional sports, which is the area that we all think we live and work in, was less than 10% of that number, which showed that sport was sticky and it covered 2 or 3 sectors. But what it did do was created jobs, it drove trade, and also it drove productivity. But more important than any of the other sectors, sport had something they didn't have, which was health outcomes, educational outcomes, and something that's really important, it was socially cohesive. So we took a step back and said, okay, what is the global sports economy? And if you look at these concentric circles here, number one was really the core industries. And I talked about professional and elite sports. What was interesting was the disproportionate effect that sector had on everything else. Then there was patisserie sport and physical activity, which represents, I'd imagine, a big slug of people on this call today. Then we looked at sporting goods and sports tourism. And between that group was a $2 trillion number. And if I tell you that the professional sport was less than 10%, you can see why it was important to do this. And between patisserie sports and sporting goods, we had over $500 million on each one. The biggest by far was sports tourism. And there was a reason why it was growing. And the reason why this was growing at a CAGR with compounded average growth rate of probably around 10 to 15% across all of them. And that was demographics. So within the global north, and I count Western Europe and North America, we have an aging but a wealthier demographic. So there's more money being spent on bike riding, on skiing, on hiking, on running, on mathematician events. And there's a bigger demographic who are living longer and are being healthier. And this was compounded by the global south, where we had 50% of the population of countries like India and subcontinent, Africa being under 25, which are driving sporting goods, driving wearables, driving data and digital. And then across all of these areas, and we mentioned earlier on the whole area of asset classes, we had broadcasting and streaming driving into this. So traditional broadcasters is giving way to streaming. We had sports services growing rapidly. And some of these big sports service companies, and I'm talking, Genius Sports, Sports Radar, these organizations there are becoming huge behemoths themselves. And then underneath that was driving the wearables industry, from Garmin through to Strava, through to Cabal, etc. And then the nutritions industry, driving everything from fuel to nutritional drinks and food. And then on top of that, gaming. And I'm not talking about gambling, I'm actually talking about gaming itself, EA Sports, and these organizations becoming really part of that big ecosystem. And if you were to take F1 and plonk it on top of this, you'd see that it touches quite a few of those squares, which is why it's getting the multiples and the revenues it's getting. But the reality was all of these couldn't work if we hadn't got the final circle. And that was a broader stakeholder group. So it was everything from governments, and you'll see local indigenous people there as well. So sport was being used to drive geo groups and geo policies. You've got advocacy groups, and you have academia and research, wider public sector, the investment community and philanthropy. So this was, in many ways, what the global sports economy was, and you can see it cuts across others. To be very clear, when we looked at measurable, when we looked at sports tourism, we didn't say what's the tourism industry, and therefore we'll take that into this model. The tourism industry itself, we broke down to those bits that were demonstrably sport related. And I can tell you the tourism industry itself is growing at a CAGR of 20%. The sports tourism industry was growing nearly at 30%, for that very reason I talked about earlier. So when we looked at the real numbers and what that was, you can see professional elite sport, 140 billion. As I say, it's a non-trivial number. It's centered around North America, Western Europe, Asia Pac. But patisserie sport and physical activity at 5-6 billion is a huge number. And this was a number we spent probably 2/3 of the year on, because nobody had actually amalgamated everything from gyms to technical equipment to mathematician events to registration events, etc., into one place. And then sporting goods and sports tourism. The reason the second bucket, the bucket many of you are sitting in patisserie sports, is really important, is because when you're talking to governments, when you're talking to cities or urban areas, without having access to that number and understanding what that can do for educational and health outcomes, you're actually disarming what you're doing and undervaluing the value of patisserie mass participation. It's not just about making money and driving revenues, it's actually the other areas it touches within a community. Then underneath this, the growth area and where a lot of the investment is going at the moment is in this 300 billion area of broadcast streaming, gaming, nutrition, sports services. And sports services are people like myself, they're the law firms, they're the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, have all now got sports divisions within their organizations, which are driving this. and then the wearables and software teams. So the point of the report was to look at, okay, where are we now and where are the headwinds and where's this going? And you can see that the growth for sport at 14%, I said it was 10 to 14, some areas are growing higher, some lower, were getting to a 2030 number of 3.6 trillion. If you look at that 5.17, that is revenue at risk due to three things. One, environment, and this is hot and cold and extreme weather. But the other one is inactivity. And inactivity is a big number that's going to cost the whole of the industry money if people aren't doing it. So once again, there is a triple bottom line for inactivity. And this is driven really by many different things, and some of them aren't actually linked to finances or anything like that. They're linked to inaccessibility to sport. Actually, people who don't have anybody to play sport with or do a sport with, or they're linked to, as I say, extreme weather conditions. And by 2050, amplification this is quite huge. It's $1.6 trillion. And as I said before, we use the same rigor as we use when we're working with our pharmaceutical clients, and the same rigor we use when we're working with our financial service clients. It's just that we had a whole year to do this, and we could do it for sport in a way that wasn't funded ever before with the World Economic Forum. And so the final slide I can show you today is what we're going to do about it. What were those pathways to prosperity? And we were looking at, okay, number one was how do we drive financial services to make that more sustainable and accelerate that number? And that was impact investing. By impact investing, we were looking at great examples. An example would be a football club who might have $1 million on the front of the shirt, with the sponsor saying, look, we will pay you 1.5 million if you invest into women's sport, do more mass participation, you do desalination, and you have a green policy. If you don't do that, you'll get 800,000, but it will be marked and worked by a third party. And 3 or 4 of the big banks are already involved. UBS, Standard Chartered are driving that type of activity. We're looking for that to become the standard. And the second was placing sport at the heart of the cities. As the world's growing and as the populations are growing, the access to green and blue spaces is getting harder. So you're seeing the infrastructure companies, and Arup, who are part of our partners, as well as governments, making sure that people can cycle safely, run safely, have got lighting, can change, and also have access to what's going on. Great example would be in the UK. You have a team like Tottenham, one of the world's greatest stadiums, in Haringey, which is an area which is pretty deprived. The problem is all of their youth academies, whatever they're doing is 20 miles north of London in Enfield, which means that the people within the community they're in do not have access to this mother spaceship that's landed in and around their opportunity. And so what they're now doing is urban academies. They're going into those areas and allowing younger people and people who don't have access to sport and mass participation to get involved. And the final one, which Emma will talk about a bit more, is championing resource stewardship. So it was looking at areas around water, looking at areas around trade and tariffs, and working with governments to show that this 2.3 trillion actually can affect and have an effect on other things that are going on within the world. So I told you that was an hour program that was going to be done very quickly. I'll ask Emma really to take her views on that and from the floor's perspective, see if I can find myself.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't have any slides. As Chris said at the start, my name is Emma. I'm the CEO of WFSGI, the World Federation of the Sporting Goods Industry, so the Global Trade Association for Sporting Goods Companies. And what I wanted to reflect on a little bit here, and then also happy to answer any questions, is why the sporting goods industry has been involved in this work. So the Sport for People and Planet report that Tony just presented on. And we have been very heavily involved behind the scenes, both as an organization, but also with our member companies. And, there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we wholeheartedly believe in the premise of the report, so that sport is an amazing vehicle to deliver for people and for planet. It's a transformative tool, and I know everybody here on the call will agree with me on that. But the second really lies in and around the work we've been doing for many years now around understanding the challenge on physical inactivity levels, why it matters for our industry, and what we can actually practically do about it. And for those of you that have heard from me before, some of these numbers are going to be a little bit the same. I'd like to say thanks for Chris to continue to allow us to present this narrative around physical inactivity and why it's so important that the sporting goods industry, but also the mass participation and the running industry come together as one to actually understand this challenge and to tackle it for the future sustainable growth of our sector. But maybe just for those that haven't heard of it, a bit of a couple of numbers to quantify the problem and then go through a little bit why we find this report and the work of Oliver Wyman and the World Economic Forum so important as we try to chart a path forwards. So when we look at inactivity levels and when someone is deemed to be inactive, it means that they don't meet the recommended levels of activity from the World Health Organization. So outside of the US market, it's the preeminent global health institution. And for adults, and youth, it's slightly different, but they are both very low bars, nothing along the lines of running a marathon or participating in a triathlon. For adults, it's a very basic 150 minutes a week of moderate movement. So anything like walking or active transport would qualify. And for youth, it's 60 minutes a day. And I don't know about many of you, but I have two small kids. 60 minutes a day seems very low bar for me, from my perspective. But when you look at the data on inactivity levels, it's really quite staggering. So for adults globally, it's 31% of adults who are currently inactive. So putting that into easier to understand figures, that's 1.8 billion people, so more than the entire population of India or China. And when you get to the next generation, the figures are actually a bit more frightening, and that's quite an emotional word, but I think it's probably quite apt in this scenario because it's 81%. So 81% of the next generation, 11 to 17-year-olds, don't move their bodies enough to maintain good health. So we're not even talking about joining a running club or a swim club or thinking about participating in a 5K. They simply don't move enough to maintain their health. And for us, why we look at this and why we consider it to be an issue that's a shared issue. So it's not just a sporting goods issue. We believe it to be an issue across the physical activity and participation sector, also across the professional sports industry. From our standpoint, when we look at those 11 to 17-year-olds, we all know that early positive experience of sport, physical activity and movement are so critical for people to lead active, healthy lives in future. So there's a health angle to it, but from a business perspective, from a sporting goods industry perspective, it's highly unlikely that inactive youth will go on to be active adults and therefore active consumers of sporting goods products. And when you look at it from a mass participation perspective, or even an elite sports participation perspective, it's also a significant risk. Will they really transition from an inactive childhood to a highly active lifelong participation? So in the past, we've done over the past 3 years, we've talked quite consistently about these numbers and looking at the problem. And up until the Sport for People and Planet report came out, we were really limited in the way we could convey the impact, both to our industry and also to wider stakeholders that we think we need to engage to make a difference here. And we were really limited to talking about it from the impact from a health perspective. So the data points we were consistently using were the current levels of inactivity will lead to 500 million more people falling into ill health by 2030 at a cost of $300 billion to global healthcare systems. And we talked about it in the context that that's 500 million more people that are less likely to be active, less likely to consume sporting goods products, and less likely to participate in your events. And of course, less money in the global ecosystem to try to resolve the problem. So to try to invest in city infrastructure, clubs, coaches, this type of thing. And it worked to a certain extent. You know, people got the problem, they understood the quantification of it, but it didn't hit home on their current business models. And that is what I think is so valuable about the work that the Oliver Wyman, Tony's team, and the World Economic Forum have done. Because as you saw on the slides, they've really quantified the sporting goods economy, the sports economy for the first time. So breaking it down into those 4 core drivers and obviously the growing layers underneath. And when we look at it from our perspective, Tony rightfully said it's not an insignificant economy, the global sports economy. So first of all, it's like presenting ourselves as a credible industry, something that can continue to grow and that governments and other industries can look to. But really critically for us, it quantified for the first time something we already subjectively knew, that the disproportionate contribution, not just from our industry sector at over 600 billion, but also from the participation and physical activity sector. As Tony said, those 2 core industries make up over $1 trillion of the global sports economy, and they absolutely dwarf the contribution from the elite and professional sports. And I think that's something that, as we've presented it and we started talking about these data points, has really started to resonate with externals, with stakeholders, but also critically within our industry. And again, coming back to the report and why we think it gives us a new way to talk about this, is that within the report, and I think I saw it being put in the chat, the colleagues at Oliver Wyman and the World Economic Forum, they've actually quantified what happens if we don't take action to tackle inactivity and climate change. And when we look at that from a sporting goods industry perspective, it's a significant sum of money that's being left on the table. So it's $169 billion of growth that's being left on the table if we don't collectively come together to tackle this as an industry. And from a participation and physical activity sector perspective, it's still significant. It's up at $138 billion of growth that's being left on the table. And I was listening to the first presentation thinking to myself, what does all of this do to those 1.3 million ballot entries, right? If we don't get this right on tackling physical inactivity. So that's what I like about this report, is that it really roots in the business case of sporting goods industry, the physical activity and participation sector, the impact on us, as well as understanding the health impact if we don't take steps to actually tackle this challenge that we have before us. And that comes back finally to a little bit, again, what I mentioned at the start, why WFSGI, why the sporting goods industry is involved in this work. Like, we continue to be absolutely bullish about the growth of the global sports economy. And, I think we're both incredibly lucky to be able to work in sports, but also be working in it at a time where the type of growth that Tony was projecting, 2.3 trillion up to 8.8 trillion, that's a significant jump. So we are incredibly privileged to be working in the industry at this time. But we like to think about it now, since the report was published in January, is how can we collectively work together to capture that inactive population? How can we capture that 1.8 billion adults that don't currently move their bodies enough? How could we get them into your mass participation events? And really try to be part of an even more significant growth story. And that comes really to the third reason why we've been involved in this work, and we will continue to be. And we're super excited to see the next steps, because I think what's important to know is that this report is not a one and done from Tony and the team and from the forum. They're really looking to use the convening power of the forum, which is incredible as a platform. I've only really experienced it in the last 12 to 18 months. But the ability of the forum to bring together different stakeholders and different actors within the ecosystem is really second to none. And I think from our perspective, that's why we want to be a part of this, because we see that the sporting goods industry, even the physical activity, mass participation, running industry, even all of us working together, we cannot achieve this alone. We have to work across sector. We have to work with governments. We have to work with the professional sports leagues. We need to look and explore how we can work better with technology industry. And we need a convening power that is much greater than just our own platform. So, I mean, Chris, Tony, I don't know if you have any comments, but really just want to give that perspective from the sporting goods industry, and we would really welcome, an aligned voice. I know, Chris, with Mass Participation World, you're super interested in this. We would really welcome an aligned voice from the mass participation industry.
As Emma said, this is the beginning of something now, rather than the end of it. And the participation industry is a huge slug of that. And what we'd really welcome is somebody to represent that group. From now until next year's forum, there is going to be a global advisory board on the sport industry, and this will need representation from this group on here, where they'll be talking to some of the world's biggest investment companies. And the one thing I wanted to say was, investment companies always look at the risk element of what they're doing, and the biggest risk they'll look at is inactivity. If they're going to put billions of dollars into a forum or into something, so mitigate. So you as a group using your power to drive revenues and mitigate that risk is going to be more and more important. So I think this is something we want to work with you going forward. Chris and I have already spoken about how we might work together going over the next 6 months. But thank you so much. Any questions for anybody while we're here, if you can hear us? And hello, Mary.
Chris, I can answer a question that's in the chat if you want me to. I don't know if we have time, though. I'll leave it to you from...
We got 5 minutes, Emma, so that's great. You take that one, and then I'll come back. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question from Tracy in the chat, and maybe I just read it out if people haven't said, but is the lack of movement by the younger generation the reason for the world getting, I think you used fatter, but let's say heavier or larger? I mean, it's really interesting. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a health expert. I come from the sports side. I'm a former athlete and I found my way into the sporting goods industry. But what we have learned over the last 3 or 4 years and working closely with the health community is that there is such a close interlinkage between the two. Inactivity and poor health are two of the main causes of what they call non-communicable diseases. So diseases that are caused by lifestyle choices and issues. And when you look at the next generation, the OECD did a really interesting publication earlier this year, Chris, that I can share with you, which is they looked at the transformation of childhood over the last couple of decades. And there's only 2 metrics for children that have gotten worse. Everything else has improved, from education, to sanitation and everything else. The only 2 metrics that have gotten worse are obesity and physical inactivity. And I think that's really quite stark when we think about, the opportunity with our industry, because I double down, I've always say I've drunk the Kool-Aid on sports. I do believe in it as a transformative power, but can it continue to be so if we are losing that next generation? So I think it is a really interesting challenge. I'm still convinced, together with Tony and other colleagues, that we really can be part of an incredible growth story and a great social impact. But we have some challenges around inactivity.
And just on that one, Emma, one of the things that came out of the report and one of the things we're working on next year is showing governments, and governments are so important to us, that their health cost can be mitigated by a healthier community. And so we're starting to link one with the other. So for every dollar you invest in infrastructure for mass participation, or just people moving and being active, will take off money later on in what you're paying in terms of in health and hospitals, etc., and also mental health as well. So all of these things are part and parcel of it. And there was I think somebody asked a question earlier on around lack of movement in North America, especially. Look, we're seeing actually mobility is being driven in the emerging worlds of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and all these areas. So don't forget that is where the volume is as well. And so from an investment perspective, and I'm looking at a macro view because that is the way that we can move the dial on this. There is still a lot to be done, and there is still a very active and very hungry audience for the products that everybody has on this call.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Emma. Lots of amazing points there, and a couple that I wanted to pick up on. I mean, following on that theme about the inactive youth and the opportunity that we as an industry have to create that. The work that London Marathon Events is doing, the amazing UBS Kids Athletics Club, 250,000 kids across India this year, and so many of these getting the unengaged engaged and setting those habits so that they are part of the future. And I would encourage you, if you don't have kids events as part of your festivals, make sure you bring them in and not see them as a bolt-on extra revenue generator, but a pathway to the future, your future participants. And there's more and more data that shows when you can bring the kids along, you also bring their parents along. How many of you on the call go and stand on the sidelines watching your kids at the weekend, whether it's running or doing other things, and ultimately sometimes get involved yourself? So I think that key, the presenting a credible industry, and many of you are aware of the Mass Participation World Vision 2050 that we launched in Ho Chi Minh at MPW 27 last year. Tonight is a wonderful milestone for us. We had a briefing call last night for our there's 5 core pillars of Vision 2050. We had a briefing call for our pillar leaders, and right now, missing this webinar, the first pillar is actually meeting under Stefan Movin from Sweden. That's the industry strengthening pillar. And Emma's colleague, Caroline Brooks, is heading up our health and well-being pillar. So thank you for that huge support. And we're seeing this as an evolving document, very much around collaboration, which was the third point that I wanted to make, that Emma said, we can't do this alone. And we're seeing MPW very much as sitting at the center of the wheel here and playing a coordinating role, bringing these key stakeholders together. We're not trying to replace anybody. We're not trying to become a new governing body or anything, just a coordinating layer to bring this incredible industry and its stakeholders together, but looking beyond it to the likes of World Federation of Sporting Goods Industry, to Arthur Wyman, to the likes of World Economic Forum and so on. And together, I think we can make a massive impact. Emma, we're just about to be out of time, but let me give the last word to you because you've got your hand up, and thank you so much to both of you. Tony, I'm working with Maria to get a call in your diary next week to follow up on these things, and we'd be delighted to be involved in that working group.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thanks, Chris. I just really wanted to respond to Steve Fleck's message in the chat, which he makes such a great point around the importance of mass participation events in actually helping transform people who have been inactive to being active. 100% correct, because what happens when somebody trains for a mass participation event, doesn't matter if it's 2.5K, 5K, 10K, is that they have to go through behavior change, right? To be able to complete that race, it has to be sustained behavior change. So the opportunity with participation in a mass participation event in order to transform lives is massive. I think what we were talking about here and why we love to engage the industry more is how do we scale that up? How do we scale that impact up? And to Chris's point, how do we make sure we capture the youth? Because this is a big behavior change that's coming around the corner to hit us, and we need to be ready for it.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks again for your time. Thank you, Tony. Look forward to speaking soon. As we say goodbye and thank you to Tony and Emma, delighted to welcome the next segment. It's called RunX, at the convergence of running, fitness, and digital engagement. And delighted to welcome Virgil Andrew, whom many of you in industry know. He's the RunX project lead at World Athletics. And joining him, I think joining us from Dubai or somewhere in the Middle East, is Hisham Shehabi. He's the COO and head of Mena for N3xt Sport. Welcome, Virgil and Hisham.
Thank you, Chris.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone around the world. Thank you for diving in. Please, I think what I'll do just to kind of set the scene is really just to tell everyone more about RunX, and that's going to come next. But really, RunX has been developed in partnership with Technogym and World Athletics. It's a one of a kind. It's a new championship. It's for everyone. Everyone can and hopefully will, because we launched it last week. Everyone can and will join this incredible new championship. So this is really just to kind of set the scene, give you an overview of the championship cadence, and I'll walk you through that now. So Chris, yeah, if you can go through to the next slide, that'd be great. So the project overview, what this really shows is how the competition is set up. So right now, the open phase is upon us. So what that means is that anyone can join the register your interest phase. So there's runx.org that is live right now. You can go on and you can register and learn more. That is live on World Athletics as well. So what that means again is you can really open your understanding of what RunX is. The qualification phase will then move on in October. And in October, you can actually go and compete live in the Tech Gym Centre on the eligible treadmills. And then the regional final will be open from the 23rd of October to the 27th of January, with the final culminating in Cesena on the 20th to 21st of March. The interesting part, though, with RunX is that the winners of the finals will have a wildcard entry to the World Road Running Championships in Guangzhou a week later after the finals. So it really is set up for some incredible running, incredible competition. And I think we've been clear at World Athletics that this really is open to not just the elites, because they can go and compete, but it's open to the casual runners and really everyone in between. So we're really kind of setting out a new championship and an exciting way to run and connect across the, I suppose you could call it, the digital ecosystem. Chris, if you move on to the next slide, please. Again, this is just a roadmap of kind of things that we're doing to embrace communities and embed RunX across the sphere of running, if you like. So the engagement phase is now, because the registration period is live. We go through to the regionals and the finals. You have to run your best 5K. It's about your best 5K, not the quickest. And you can be slow, quick, and everything in between. But I suppose the proviso is that you run on a Technogym machine. They are the partner with World Athletics, and you can do that quite easily within by finding a gym on the RunX portal. So you'll be able to go in on the portal, register, run your 5K, and easily find where you can actually go and do that. So, it really is open to everyone. It's a global competition, and we're just so excited to launch that. But I think that, we are in, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call would know, we are almost we're in startup phase, and we've kind of hitting a number of milestones. We launched in Cesena last week to, I suppose, the public, global media, and what we're obviously ultimately trying to do is make sure that we kind of reach that critical mass, but that's hard to do. So it's almost like it can be hard to explain to people what RunX is, and people have kind of had lots of questions in the interim up until this point. But I suppose, from my point of view, the best way of explaining what RunX is by showing it in real life, which is a perfect segue onto the video and how it launched in Cesena last week. So Chris, if you can hit play, that would be fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise for the RunX runner.
Thank you very much. I think this is almost like a perfect segue to hand over to Hisham. And what I'd like to almost kind of set the stage now is to talk about almost like what is happening in running. And I've got some insights here, but I think we're at an interesting moment in terms of participation, the kind of bubble that everyone talks of, and mushrooming, events mushrooming, sellouts, etc. But I think this would be a good chance to get Hisham's opinion on where the sport is, where it's going, why new formats are incredibly important, which is why we're here for RunX, and just to kind of see what's happening on your side of the world. Hisham, please.
Thank you, Virgil, and thank you, Chris, Alessio, for the invitation, and really enjoyed the previous conversations, especially the one about AI. So yeah, in this side of the world, I'm calling from Riyadh, by the way. And similar to other places, I think the wellness and fitness trend is is booming. There's a growth in community, and ironically, as we progress further in kind of AI transformation and becoming accelerating in a digital fashion, there is this thirst and appetite for in-person, real-life connection, driven by a demographic shift. So the younger populations, they crave this kind of connection. Even more when they don't partake in partying, as an example, So their social connections come through running clubs, come through fitness clubs, come through wellness tourism, traveling for events, traveling for marathons, And this is, in a place like Saudi Arabia, this is a new phenomenon. Not so much in the rest of the region, like places like Bahrain, where I'm originally from, or the United Arab Emirates or Qatar. They've had long standing events across the spectrum of multi-sport and running and so on. But there's really now an appetite by these cities to also host activities and events that bring the population out, not just elite athletes, but really engage the whole city, from multi-day festivals leading up to a running event to things that, as was said earlier, like kids programming, so that you can spend the whole day at an event, not just send the parent at 5 a.m. to the running start and then back home with a medal at 7 a.m. when the kids are awake, but really extending that experience into the rest of the day, which is quite exciting in terms of bringing in new brands, bringing in new activities and communities. And so what is interesting to me, Virgil, about what you guys are doing with World Athletics is you're giving birth to a new discipline, which is sitting on top of all of these mega trends that I was just talking about, So it's quite exciting. And as a startup today, with the capabilities that exist, again, with AI and kind of digital capabilities, and again, that appetite from cities to promote their cities as great tourism destinations, it is the right value proposition, as opposed to a 7-day event which takes over the city center and then blocks out people, makes the neighborhood a bit inaccessible for a few days. That kind of heavy operation is something that cities, are starting to look at as, okay, I'll do a RunX or a HYROX, better for me than doing a 3-day event where I close half of the city, So yeah, these are some of the considerations, I think, which go in favor and tailwinds for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's quite touched in terms of the deliverability. What Athletics bring, that best-in-class solution side of it, and Technism bringing the tech ecosystem and the digital smarts, as it were. And from World Athletics side, we're clear that it's building a new type of global community, as it were. To paraphrase, Seb, who was there at the launch, it is essential for this to be part of the growth of the sport. But to your point, in terms of, I think we're at an interesting juncture, as it were, in terms of kind of the sport of running, and which is why this is such a key time to launch this this championship, and to be a little bit controversial. I think that we're so heavily dependent on the experience economy. We're so dependent on scrolling and Insta likes and just throwaway culture. And I think that almost in a way we're fighting for so much noise, and all the events have so much attention around them. If you look at London Marathon, everyone's competing. I suppose the brands are really competing for airtime, and I think it's lost its way in a little bit in terms of how people look at running, and it almost dilutes the impact of what's being said, and B, it dilutes the community aspect that running has almost always been quite clear on. So if you're looking at the global and and the long tail of the participation of RunX. I think that's, you know, we are really clear, both Tech the Gym and World Athletics, that communities will play a crucial and key element of driving this new discipline. As you look at all the new audiences that you were discussing, you know, you've got the hybrid audiences, you've got the other kind of, you know, wellness fitness audiences. People are running in different ways, and it's been so fascinating to look at the different pockets of runners, and I think all those different types of runners can really lean into this discipline, because everyone can run a 5K. You've got it from the park run kind of angle, and I'm a little bit sick of the kind of performance splaining right now, when it's about posting your Strava time and not your chip time. But I think we want to get away from the real high-end performance aspect of, and this is on X is about precision, because there's so many interesting data points, and I think that's something that I'm sure you can speak more on, that from the kind of esports kind of angle. Everything's at your fingertips these days, but especially with RunX, there's such an incredible, rich data set going into performance, how you train, how you run, and education, which again, from World Athletics side is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if I may say as well, Virgil, like, again, running is maybe not unique in the sense that it is a sport and sport unites. Emma was saying, like, it's a great platform to bring people together. People can share values. And I think this is like one of the really good points about extending the running, let's say, surface area, so that more people can get involved. And there, here, for example, in Saudi, again, anecdotally, there's like separate gyms, for male and female. There's very few mixed gyms, and it's not like publicized. You just hear about them like underground. And so there is this culture where people are kind of like in their own communities, maybe a bit blocked off. So it would be great that there are opportunities to bring them out of those, into competition. Treadmill is something that almost everybody does in the gym, so it's really like brings them out into like a new ecosystem, new experiences. And I think here, again, one of the new trends in the market is, the rise of influencers and how there's a disintermediation of media, right? So you don't have just like big broadcasters or big news agencies anymore. You have micro influencers, let's say, smaller microphones.
Yeah, hyperlocal. Yeah.
Exactly. They aggregate around them. They share the same values. They probably live a similar lifestyle. And so all of these things make it a super powerful experience, because you are sharing in something that you are fully a part of, like heart, body, and soul. And so I'm excited about this because in the last, if you think about the last, 2008 was when the iPhone came out. So it's only been like 18 years, so like 0 to graduating high school, that we've all lived with this. And yet those of us who have, maybe I'm like a millennial, I have so much like cognitive load, especially now with AI. Yes, I'm more productive, but actually like I fill up so quickly these days. Like there's just so much I can do on digital. And so these physical experiences, I crave them more, and I think this will be a trend moving forward, because the more and more we automate, the more and more we spend time with agents, actually the more we will crave human connection. And so I think that will drive even further discovery. And where probably like startup leagues live and die is on distribution and discoverability, so that I think having World Athletics as the foundation of RunX really helps you become global really quickly and provides that surface area to grow, which not a lot of startup leagues have.
Agreed. I mean, I love the fact that
Virgil, we're going to have to start to wrap it up. So just make this one the last one, if you wouldn't mind. We're pretty much out of time.
Sure, Chris. I was just going to say, I love the fact that I can I can compete against a friend in my gym, and someone from Australia or Italy in RunX in this competition, and test myself and get everyone involved. So yeah, let's all move for a better world, and let's all RunX.
Awesome.
Well
Thank
said,
you.
Virgil.
Thank you, Virgil. Thank you, Hisham. A couple of key things there. Obviously, great to see the new concept. Really interesting. Hisham, thanks for sharing perspectives from different parts of the world. And I think that's the one thing is so fascinating about our industry is it just varies so much from continent to continent and country to country, even on the same continent. So be really interesting to see how this transcends, as you mentioned, the shift of the younger generation looking to be part of these communities, what the treadmill provides. There's a number of different questions in the chat. I'd encourage you, Hisham and Virgil, maybe you can jump into the chat and respond to some of those questions, some of them around accessibility, how do people get access to the competition if they don't belong to a gym and so on. But I'm sure you can respond to those on the chat so we can keep the program moving. But thank you so much again, Hisham and Virgil, as we move on to our next segment. Thank you. So as we move on to the next segment, which is titled Inclusivity and Technology, Wheelchairs, Prostheses, and the One Shoe Campaign, delighted to welcome Stef Reid, Paralympic medalist, MBE world champion and creator of the One Shoe Campaign. And she's going to be in conversation with Natacha Manchado, the running project manager for World Athletics. Over to you, Stef and Manchado. Welcome, and Natacha, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Hello, Stef. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Like, it's an honor to receive you, and especially for me, maybe because I started my professional trajectory with the Paralympic movement. So it's very special to be here. I was there in London in 2012 when you won one of your Paralympic medals. So it's very special having you here in this session with us. So Stef is a 3 times Paralympic medalist, former world record holder, and among so many other titles and achievements, she's also the creator of the One Shoe campaign. So Stef, thanks once again, and the floor is yours.
You may have seen a campaign that I started just over 2 years ago when I asked Nike if I could buy just one running shoe because I only actually need one when I run. You can see I run with one shoe and one blade. Now, I've always loved sports and I've always loved running. My original dream was to be an international rugby superstar. Now, unfortunately, I was in a boating accident when I was 15 and my right foot had to be amputated. And I thought that that would be it for me for sport until I discovered the world of running blades. Now, the short version is that I ended up getting my dream life as a professional athlete. And for 18 years, athletics was my job. And I competed in 4 Paralympic Games as a sprinter and as a long jumper. And I retired in 2022 and started exploring the world of distance running, which led to my interest in the fancy road running shoes. And the thing is, I got tired of buying an expensive pair of running shoes only to throw one of them away. And a few weeks before I had asked Nike if I could buy just one running shoe, my sister had actually sent me a photo of this mannequin she saw in a Nike store that had one running shoe and one blade, just like me. And I love the mannequin. I wish 15-year-old Stef, who had just had her foot amputated, had seen this because maybe she wouldn't have struggled for so long to feel like she belonged in the world of sport. And it was the reason why I asked Nike if I could buy just one shoe, because I figured that if someone dressed this mannequin with one shoe, then surely they'll understand my situation as I am the real life version of this mannequin. Now, ultimately, the answer was no. And the story was picked up by news outlets across the world. I mean, the story went viral across social media. It struck a nerve with people, and not in the way you might expect, because everybody cared about the story, not just people with disabilities. And it was for two reasons. Number one, people care that brands and organizations live up to the things they say are important to them. Integrity matters. But the second reason was, disabled or not, we all want the same thing from our organizations and from our brands. We want to be valued by them. We don't want to be seen as a nameless average. We want to be seen and cared for as individuals. Now, I had a statistics professor in university that loved to illustrate the problem with the average person with this phrase. The average person in the world has one breast and one testicle, which means that if you're designing for the average person, you're designing for no one, because that person doesn't actually exist. And it's much harder to do things that are bespoke and specific. It is not efficient. It takes a lot more thought and a lot more planning and effort, but that is what is required if you want something that works in real life. And it matters because when you are bespoke and specific, customers know that you care about them as individuals. Now, there were some negative comments on socials, and the majority were around the fact that it is simply too hard for a company to be expected to cater to such a niche scenario as mine. And they were wrong for several reasons. The first is that shoe fit is not niche. It is far more common for an adult to have feet that don't match than feet that do. And for most, it's half a size, and they just accept that they will always have one foot that is not quite as comfortable in a shoe as the other. Which seems absolutely crazy to me, considering we have all these conversations about high performance foam and the contour of the shoe and carbon fiber plates. And yet, surely one of the most basic ideals of a high performance running shoe is a good fit. And I know that it's not too hard for a shoe company, because a week after the story broke in 2024, Allison Felix contacted me to say that her shoe company, Seish, had introduced a single shoe policy for amputees to go along with her maternity shoe policy that sends pregnant women a complimentary pair of shoes if their feet increases in size during pregnancy. And just a few months ago, Adidas announced the launch of their single shoe service in Europe. So you can now go into any Adidas store and buy just one shoe. So of course I went incognito to their store in London to try it out. And when I went to the till and said I would like to buy just one shoe, the lady helping me broke into this massive smile, and she said she had just been trained on the policy and she was so excited to have her first single shoe customer and so happy that Adidas was now offering it. And she logged in the discount code, she double checked which shoe I actually wanted in the box, and that was it. I mean, it really was that simple. I've been an amputee now for 25 years, and it surprised me how good I felt walking out of that store and just feeling like, wow, someone cares about my goals and wants to create an environment for me to excel. We have so many parts of the running community represented on the webinar, and whether you are a brand, an organization, an events provider, a running club, this is why this conversation matters. There is huge value in being inclusive. When customers see that the participation and inclusion of all people is important to you, they automatically know that they will be valued as well. Now, for the last 6 years of my long jump career, I was coached by Aston Moore, who's the current coach to heptathlete Katarina Johnson-Thompson. Now, I was his first para athlete back in 2015, and he was a little nervous. He was worried he might say or do the wrong thing, but he dove in anyways and learned as he went. And one day we were working on my hitch kick, and he said, "Stef, I need you to do this with your good leg and this with your bad leg." And I headed off to try, but a few seconds later he called me back and he said, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm referring to this as your bad leg. I mean, that blade works great." The thing is, language has always been really important to Aston as a coach, and he realized his own bias and he corrected it immediately. And he now has several para athletes in his group with a variety of disabilities, and he loves it. If you ask him, he'll say, he'd been coaching for a long time and he was tired of solving the same biomechanical problems. And he loves that coaching a variety of people makes him a better coach for all of his athletes. So the point is, don't worry if you don't have all of the answers up front, and don't worry if you get it wrong on occasion, because you will. I have a disability and I can still get inclusion wrong. You apologize, you correct it, and you move on. It is your willingness to learn and engage that matters, not being perfect at it. And it will take effort, but it will be worth it. And this is why. This is a sneak peek at the cover for this month's La Galerie cover. Now, you might be wondering why a high fashion magazine is interested in either running shoes or in the One Shoe campaign. And the answer is luxury. Now, the ultimate luxury in high fashion isn't a designer label. It's having something designed specifically for you and your body, whether or not you have a disability. And the brands and events that win aren't asking their customers to adapt. They are adapting to their customers. And this is why inclusion matters, both as a business case and for creating the kind of world that we all actually want to live in. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stef. I think that it's very interesting to listen to you and your campaign, especially because we are talking about innovation and then a lot of technology things. And when we look like to the humans that is inside, and I think that maybe Bob in the first panel talking about this, like it's about humans as well. So what we needed and how we can work with the innovation like on this side. And it's absolutely like wonderful to listen to you and about your campaign. Chris, I don't know if you have any other questions to Stef, but it was brilliant to have Stef among us.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Stef, for making the time and for that inspirational presentation. Thanks, Natacha, for coordinating. I love the point that you said, don't worry if you don't have all the answers. You might get it wrong, recognize, apologize, and try again. And I think that's so often, and it maybe ties back even to where we even started today. People freaked out about AI and they might not feel that they have the answers, but you have a try. And in this situation of having a go to be inclusive of people is this great opportunity. Have a try. You might get it wrong, but it's better to try than not to try, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. And like I said, you don't worry about getting it wrong because you will, which is meant to be encouraging. And people, they're not. Everyone understands that there's forgiveness, and what is far more important is just that you apologize quickly and you learn from it. People want humanity, not perfection, and there is actually quite a lot of forgiveness in the disability community. People, by and large, are just so excited that you're willing to take that chance and to engage.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stef. I'd love to maybe just come back to the beginning of your story, which resonated with me. You mentioned that you wanted to be an elite rugby player, and I grew up in Zimbabwe and went to university in South Africa. Do you still carry that passion?
So, do you know what? Well, you'll appreciate this. So when you become, I'm not the biggest person in the world. If you meet me, everyone's always like, really, you played rugby? Yes, I was a scrum half, and my biggest asset was speed. And one of the things that you lose when you become an amputee and run with a blade, not so much your speed, but your agility. So I did actually go back to playing rugby when I got my first running blade. And the problem was in my head, I could still dart in and out, but in reality, I could not. And I was eating a lot of dirt. So I did try, but I thought maybe this isn't going to be for me, which is when I thought maybe I'll switch to sprinting and, just do a straight shot where no one's going to tackle me.
Wonderful. But you still follow it as a sport?
I do. Well, to be honest, it took about 5 years just because I love the sport so much, and it was tough not to be able to play it. So I had a little bit of a break, and then I dove back in. Actually, my original plan, I was born in New Zealand, so I was going to go back to New Zealand and try do university there and try and play for them.
For the Black Ferns. Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for that inspirational segment. All the very best with the ongoing program. It's such an inspirational program, and I'm sure it's going to continue to impact the lives of many.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stef.
Thank you, Stef.
Thanks, Natacha.
Thank you, Chris.
Folks, as we move on to our next segment, which is Following the Capital, Investment Trends Shaping Running. Delighted to welcome someone who needs no introduction again, Alessio Punzi, Head of Road Running and Mass Participation at World Athletics, and Dennis Cranston, who is the Director of Oberon Securities and co-founder of TrackCred. Dennis, wonderful to see you again. It's been quite a number of years, but so great to have you on the screen. And I'm going to hand you over to the safe hands of Alessio to take us through the next 20 minutes or so. Over to you two.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris. Alessio, good to see you. Let's dive right in.
Good to see you indeed. Good to see you indeed, Dennis. This is one of my favorite type of panel, one in which I know something, but very little about it. Yet on the other side of the line, there is someone very knowledgeable, so the conversation will hopefully be interesting for us as well, for the 100+ people sitting online with us. So Dennis, I've been knowing you for quite some time. I know TrackCred, but not everybody might. Who are you and what is TrackCred and why are we having this conversation today?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's start with TrackCred as pertinent to the subject of this conversation. And we have some time. I'm happy to talk a little bit about my background. But my background, just in short, is at the overlap of technology, finance, and mass participation endurance sports. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. TrackCred is a network for investors, founders, and operators in human performance and endurance sport. We operate at the intersection of activity, technology, and capital. We constantly talk to entrepreneurs, capital allocators, and executives, from race directors to brand executives to large incumbent and non-endemic corporate partners in the space, and acquirers in the ecosystem. My full-time job as an investment banker is in sell-side M&A. And so I get a 360-degree view of the space through my founding of TrackCred as a platform for the community and through my work as a sell-side banker. And something that is unique to us and that I wanted to share based on a comment that I saw in the chat actually just a few minutes ago is that innovation is not in the lab and it's not for our purposes of our community. It's not in elite performance. We work specifically with innovation that comes out of elite performance that then trickles down to the mass population, gets adopted, and then helps our companies scale and investors in those companies grow with that. And so we ask that companies in our community have a product when they come in. We put it in the hands of our members, who are most of whom are accredited investors, angel or professionally. Who then and they're avid runners, cyclists, etc. So they get to try the product and get to give us their input that way. So that's a little bit about TrackCred. One important thing is we also have a pretty good view into what doesn't work. So we keep our conversation honest when we do case studies at our events for founders. We ask that they share what has not worked as well. And so that is the value that we bring to the community is that 360-degree independent view of innovation, what works, what doesn't, what scales, what doesn't, and what investors should be looking at.
So Dennis, you have seen stuff and you are seeing stuff. Me as a profane of the industry, as an outsider, I mean, inside of the running industry, but definitely an outsider in the investment a sector. I do see from newsletters, from LinkedIn posts, from anecdotes, rumors, that the running sector, broadly intended, as both events, human performance, food supplements, technology, AI platforms, registration systems, etc., is attracting an increasing a number of eyes, increasing number of more and more interest. Is it just my bias, or is this really happening?
It's absolutely true, and I agree with you, and that is again the premise for doing everything we're doing. If you look at what has happened over the past decade, running has shifted from a lifestyle category with disparate and somewhat loosely related or completely unrelated verticals of hardware, software, apparel, nutrition, payments, registration systems, and so forth, into a cohesive ecosystem. Where everything is connected, both in the physical sense, in the digital sense, but also in the proverbial sense. So we also look at the sheer size of the industry, and we see estimated $400 to $800 billion of economic impact. If we look at everything.
Say that again. 400 to 800.
400 to 800 billion of total addressable market, and I'm happy to share our data. It sounds, a bit aspirational. We have this data backed by sources. I'm happy to share it with anyone on this webinar and beyond. But it's everything from apparel and footwear down to smaller categories like B2B software for operations. And we'll touch upon that again because it's a very important, fast-growing segment and actually directly relevant to the race directors on this webinar and other players in the ecosystem. But just the tech segment alone within that is somewhere in the range of 100 to over $200 billion. And the total industry, again, is, we estimate at 400 to 800 billion.
How much of that is events, if you have figures?
Events, including registration participation fees, is about just over 20 billion at this time. It's growing fast as well. So at about 8% compound annual growth rate, we expect that to double over the next 10 years.
Wow.
And within that, the specifically fast growing segment is ultras. It is small by the standards of the global economy, but it's a $3 billion industry growing at 9% CAGR, and at a compounding rate that gets us to doubling within the next 8 years.
But Dennis, are there, in your opinion, easily understandable pockets of scalability specifically in the events industry, with few exceptions? The market is very fragmented, just because, as we often say, it's the city that owns the marathon. It's not a franchise that you can easily, spread across the country or even across the world. Guide me through the thought process of an investor thinking, okay, this marathon, this series is worth investing because maybe I can grow by, acquiring other races, or maybe we can create vertical integration, acquiring registration systems, photo services, and whatnot. Help me understand that.
Absolutely. So, and maybe it might be helpful to take a step back and kind of talk about what an investor means. There are different types of investors, and this is something that came to me on the way into the office, that it might be helpful to do just that. So, their friends and family and angel, just going sort of looking at the life cycle of a company or an event entity, if you will. Friends and family angel investors is first money in, and they back the founder personally, which some of the institutional investors take a very close look at as well, to be clear. But those are basically your supporters, your champions, who give you money with little expectation of financial return. Then from there, very quickly, we get to institutional investors like venture capital investors, the likes of Andreessen Horowitz, the Sequoias, the TCVs, Dragoneers, Jackson Square Ventures, the last three being, of course, very prominent investors in Strava, private equity investors that we all know in this space, like Spectrum, that has invested into All Trails, like Providence, that invested into Ironman in 2008. Those are investors that have a full expectation of financial return. And the reason is, and this is hiding in plain sight for founders and other ecosystem players, not just in our space, but all across industries and even in tech, is that they have bosses. They have to answer to their LPs, which are limited partners that are institutional investors in those funds. So their business model and their operational everything that they do is driven by the demand from their LPs to generate a certain return on their investment, and that what empowers them to have the funds to invest in individual companies. If you look at venture capital, your typical model is they invest in 100 different companies. 90 of them will go bankrupt. 10 of them will have some return, and one of the 100 will be the so-called fund returner with outsized return of about 100x the investment. It's difficult to get those types of returns in businesses that are events-based, that are services-based. It's a lot easier to get those types of returns in scalable businesses like software. And that's why you've seen the proliferation of software, both on the B2B side and on the B2C side. And
you mean in the running industry, in our sport, yeah.
Absolutely. What the basic tenets of investment in general hold true for the running industry as well. So this is why you see success stories of companies like Whoop, like Aura, which are of course tangentially overlapping with our industry in a large degree, and with Strava, that is as well known, filed an S1 confidentially and is looking to go public this year, and is working with the likes of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan to take the company public at what is expected to be about a $3 billion valuation, which would be a significant return to the institutional investors into Strava.
And specifically, besides IT and technology-backed sectors, what else is hot in the running and endurance industry? I remember that at one of your pre-New York Marathon events, we'll talk about that later. There was a lot of attention on biomarker and human performance. Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. If we want to see, look at what is trending now and what will be trending for years to come, there are a couple of very prominent trends. So everything that is community-based, that relies on community engagement, is highly sticky in its nature and is highly appealing to investors. Everything that is built around recurring engagement, recurring being subscription-based businesses like Runner that was acquired by Strava, like Strava itself, that is a category that is highly appealing to investors due to the just the unit economics of it, starting with a very low churn. Speaking of low churn, there's an outstanding company in our industry that is a B2B software business that is RunSignup, that is well known for its and no relationship or of any kind to the company. I just wanted to call it out as someone who notoriously has customer churn in the low single digits. And of course, things are changing, and there are people on this call who are competing directly with them and who may challenge those numbers or the fundamentals behind them. But that's something else that investors are looking at now. And fast forwarding into the current age of AI, proprietary data is extremely important for a successful company that is being founded today, that is looking to get financed and
what exactly is that? Help me understand. What is meant by proprietary data for
so any proprietary customer data set? So just taking a little step back. So here at Oberon, we focus specifically on data insights, analytics, and AI in terms of our M&A coverage. We published a quarterly report every 3 months. We take a deep, long look at what is happening in the industry, from macroeconomic trends to industry trends to transactions that happen in the industry. And what has been happening with AI specifically recently is folks are taking a step back from investing into anything that has an I label on it anything that's just a simple wrapper in terms of a foundational LLM model and is rooted in industry expertise, proprietary first-party data that is collected directly from the customer, and specific software developer expertise in AI or talent. It's really hard for our industry to compete on the third one, just simply because there's so much dry powder that goes to the likes of OpenAI, Perplexity, and SpaceX in terms of just what they can afford in terms of hiring developers. But the first two are absolutely true. There's industry-specific data, which you mentioned, biomarker data, participation data, transactional data from the registration and payment systems. And if that is all anonymously tied into a single runner persona and paired with industry-specific algorithms in the AI case, that builds a really compelling, that gives a foundation for a really compelling platform to be built. And if you look at the companies that Strava has acquired en route to its IPO over the past few years, you can see that they're building pieces of healthcare in recovery athletics, runner engagement, and AI-driven training and runner technology that they did not develop in-house, and it was cheaper to acquire than to build in-house in FatMap. And so that is creating that vertical stack catering to a single individual that is a high spender that spends $2,000 to $5,000.
That is the thing, Dennis. That is the thing. For many, many days, for certainly years, maybe a few decades, we've been touting this narrative of running being the most accessible sport. It definitely still is. All you need is a pair of shorts and trainers. Yes, but in reality, in mature economies, people are spending incomparably more today than even just 10, 15 years ago. We see that, and that is driving the prices of everything up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Actually, it's a good thing because more and more entities are coming into the sport, also attracted by the, as you say, recurring investments that runners make. But an unscripted question: if you are a race organizer, a successful race organizer, but you only have essentially one unit of product, one type of product that you sell at what particular point in time, yes, you may get revenues 10, 11 months ahead of time, but you're selling one. How would you do about creating this stack that you just mentioned? What are the services can be provided?
So that's a great question, and I was thinking about that as well. I would look to partner with companies that have open APIs that are open to partnerships with races. One particular one, and look, again, this is no relationship with the company, but Movement has been on my radar recently as a company that takes that extra step in collecting and analyzing consumer data, runner data in a way that some of their competitors do not. They're rooted in race registration, but they take the extra step to make that data actionable in terms of creating a long tail of commerce. That is actually one of my fast forwarding to what is appealing to investors today. Content to commerce is one of my personal favorite categories. There have been players on the investment side in the space who have come to me over the last several years who have invested in content to commerce platforms across other sports or other sticky human activities, and specifically look for that in running. Unfortunately, with the exception of a few well-known communities built around brands, that doesn't exist at scale in a way that's accessible to investors. But if I'm a race organizer, I want to partner with technology providers that will enable me to create that 365-day-a-year relationship with my runner and deliver value to the runner on a, if not on a daily, then on a weekly basis, that will allow me to facilitate commerce vis-a-vis that runner, but also collect data along the way that is then highly valuable first-party data that is, when it's aggregated, can be the nucleus of my relationship with the runner going forward and my relationship with the partner brands, which is highly important.
So one important takeaway from this conversation, Dennis, is that race organizers are historically very good at focusing on consumer-facing side of things, great race, great experience, but more often than not, the technology stack is overlooked, and that is where the real value can be unlocked. Is this a fair assumption that I'm making?
Yes, absolutely. Look, and it goes both for their operating system backbone type infrastructure. So, registration, payments, and CRM, things that we're all know well and are used to. But also for other additions to that stack that again would dig into every touch point of the running economy, every type of good or service that the runner purchases 365 days a year. Just looking at Nike as an example, they've acquired over the years, since 2018, they've acquired Zodiac for predictive customer LTV analytics, a company called Invertex for fitting, company called Select for demand forecasting, and most recently, a company called Datalog, which is an AI native data integration across all their apps, across supply chain, across their IoT, all of their enterprise systems. And that's what drives customer stickiness and helps you monetize it at the end of the day. I'm currently in conversation with a stealth startup out of the Southeast that is an AI native inventory management system for small and large retailers and brands. And the amount of inbound interest that they're getting just based on the fact that they can not only help that ecosystem function better and smooth out some of the kinks in that relationship between the brand, the retailer, and the end consumer, but also create tons and tons of first-party, second-party data that can be acted upon going forward. That to me is a huge indication on what's to come. And last thing I wanted to say, I would love to talk separately about the convergence between running, endurance, performance, and healthcare.
And health, I knew you would go there because I love it.
We haven't even touched.
I knew you would go there. We don't have much time today, but certainly we can have more conversations. Dennis, explain in the final few seconds that we have, how can people join TrackCred and the events that you do before London, before New York Marathon, Boston Marathon? What are they and why it makes sense for people, just like I did, to attend?
Thank you, Alessia. I want to stop short of, and I appreciate the opportunity. I want to stop short of putting up a full-size ad at the end of this, but we are an open community to any founder, and that includes brands, races, any type of technology company that is aligned and a fit with human performance and endurance sports. We host in-person events at all major marathons. We have a continuity layer that connects all members of our organization throughout the year. And our focus really is not so much on thought leadership, and that's why I appreciate being included as part of this webinar today. We focus exclusively on facilitating commercial transactions, whether it be investment if you're an investor, fundraising if you are a founder, or a commercial partnership if you're a brand or an entity like a race. We are open to everyone to explore, and I'll share some links to do just that with Alessia and Chris, and everybody will be able to access it following this conversation.
Dennis, thank you. Happy summer and happy World Cup if you watch. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessio and Dennis. Great to see you again, Dennis. Look forward to seeing you in New York. I'll be there this year, almost certainly. A couple of key things that I wanted to pick up there before we move on to the next segment. Data obviously came up regularly, as it has on a few other occasions tonight. The real value of having the appropriate tech stack, important to be able to leverage that data. And then delighted to hear that part at the end about running and healthcare and the intersection. I mentioned Vision 2050 and the health element is a huge part that I think is a untapped narrative in our industry, and certainly be hearing more about that as we go forward. So thank you again, Alessio and Dennis. As we move to a hugely exciting segment, I've had the pleasure of listening to Bill Quinn, who's a futurist for the global consulting practice at Tata Consultancy Services before. Not only a futurist, but an avid runner who I think has now run 4 of the majors. Bill, delighted to welcome you to the screen to talk about looking down the road, the future of AI and tech in road races. Great to see you again, Bill. Welcome and thanks. I know we're running a little bit behind time. Thanks for waiting patiently there for us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No problem. Excited to be here.
Thanks so much. You should be able to share your screen, and I'll leave it to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for having me and inviting me to present. Really excited to be here. So my name is Bill Quinn, and I'm a futurist at TCS. TCS is a global IT services and consultancy firm based in Mumbai and offices all over the world. And one of the things that I often get asked, as a futurist is, what does the future hold? What's going to happen with, this or that? And, as a futurist, we don't predict the future. Instead, what I like to say is we rehearse the future, and we help our clients rehearse the future and prepare for a range of possibilities. And so as I talk about, sort of the things that we're looking at in the future, I'm really trying to set it up in the context of how to think about the future and how to think about these technologies and, how you might implement them into your races, into your mass participation events. And so that's really the context around how we're going to set this up. And I think it's important for us to start by taking a step back and looking backwards before we look forwards. And I love this quote from Winston Churchill: the further backward you look, the further forward you can see. I think it's really, sort of apt for understanding where the future might be headed. So with that, it's important to understand, history is important because it reveals the patterns, right? People like to say that, history repeats itself. It doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it definitely reveals patterns. And so what are the deeper patterns that history reveals? The biggest one is this, and that is that, it's something that's existed since the beginning of time. And that is that our systems, and we can think about systems from a global scale, from a societal scale, or from the scale that we run in terms of putting on marathons and other mass participation events. These systems have limits. And as pressure starts to get put on those systems, constraints and cracks start to form. And we get to a point where these systems are no longer able to support the pressure that is being applied to them. And that's when we see a tip from one era to the next, or when we get to a point where we need to undergo some pretty massive change. And so if we think about this in the context of marathons, right, there's a lot of pressure being put on these marathons. They're more popular than ever before. That's awesome, but it's also, a bit of a blessing and a curse. How do we safely, increase the numbers of these marathons? And how do we allow more and more people to participate? And so this is really a story about systemic change. How does pressure on these systems really force us to change and do that in a meaningful and positive way? We're going to look at this in the context of one particular period of time, and that's the industrial age. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But when we think about systemic change, it really comes in 4 areas. And we're only going to touch on a couple of these today because we're a little short on time. But it's really human capacity, our ability to change, the growth of human knowledge that propels us forward, general purpose technologies, fire, electricity, the internet, potentially artificial intelligence, and then convergence. So we're going to focus today on human capacity and convergence. And human capacity, kind of the big takeaway here is that we're just a stubborn species. We don't like to change unless change is really forced upon us, right? And so that's why we don't see ourselves proactively making a lot of changes, even though it's pretty obvious that we need to do so. We're slow to do that. And so for that reason, if I can leave you with just one thought to take away today, it's from another futurist named Alvin Toffler. And that is the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read or write, but those who can't learn unlearn, and relearn, and do that over and over again throughout our lives and throughout our careers. Now, that's really easy to say. It's a lot harder to do. And let's have a look at what I mean by that.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left.
So that's a professor that's been trying to give away $100 to anybody that can ride that bike across the stage for something like 8 or 9 years now. And last I checked, he's yet to have to part with that money. So it's just a good example of how deeply ingrained our mental models become and how difficult it is to break those. And that's why this quote is so important for us to remember going forward. So the next piece of this is the idea of convergence. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to use the industrial age to articulate this, the industrial age being kind of the period of time that we're in right now. We'll look at this period of time from about 1870 to 1970, the second industrial revolution. A lot of people call it the special century. And that's because it was this period of time where our standard of living, particularly for those of us in the Western world, our standard of living was elevated in a way we had never seen before in human history over a relatively very short period of time. The homes that we lived in, the way that we grew and distributed food, our education system, all of these things changed in a massive way in a relatively short period of time. And so we studied this, and I know this is an eye chart, don't worry about looking at each box. But what we really came away with was this notion of convergence. It wasn't any one event. It wasn't any one technology that really propelled us forward. It was the convergence of new geopolitical models being formed, new societal norms, new scientific and technological breakthroughs, new economic models, and catalysts, things like World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, that propelled us forward and enabled this special century. And so when we think about sort of going from one period of one era to the next, right? From one great transformation to the next. It's really a story of systemic compression and those domains, science, technology, society, et cetera, really converging in big and amazing ways. And so the question then is, how do we sort of keep track of and understand this convergence? And so we put together this tool, we call it our convergence model. And what it's designed to do is look at all of the individual things that are going on inside of each of those domains, science and technology, society, et cetera, and really start to understand not only what's going on with that particular piece of technology or that societal factor, but how those things are converging, and really understanding that convergence. And so I'm going to use the example of running as a way to articulate that. And just to give you a sense of some of the things that are on this model and how we think about convergence, we're just going to pick a couple of them, and we'll start with advanced prosthetics.
Well, basically, the way it works is that I think about the movement that I want to make, and I twitch a series of muscles, and the muscle twitches are being recorded by 16 electrodes that are positioned inside the socket, and then transform that into electric impulses that run through the forearm and powers the Covey hand, my bionic hand.
Okay, and where exactly does the AI come into the picture?
So the AI is a lot of data recording. It's basically every time I use the arm, every time I make a movement, it records it. It starts to learn how I use the arm, and it starts to predict the movements that I want to make, including rotating it like that.
So a great example of artificial intelligence and robotics converging together to really elevate and enhance society, right? And allow people who are not able to do certain things to partake in activities like running. And we're seeing a lot of examples of this in terms of this marriage of robotics and artificial intelligence to allow disabled people to do things that they weren't able to do before. The next one that we'll talk about is digital twins.
Imagine you could shave 30 seconds off your time without lacing up. As innovators solving problems around the world, TCS uses digital twin technology to help you rehearse the future.
So for those who don't know, most of you probably do, that is Des Linden, two-time Olympian, Boston Marathon champion. And TCS started working with her several years ago, but in 2023, we embarked on this project, this digital twin heart project, and created a digital twin of Des Linden's heart. And the idea behind that was being able to give her a deeper understanding of how her training translated into athletic performance, and really being able to dive in at a level that had never been possible before, a way to understand how that training and that performance really came together and translated into better performance down the road. That was a hugely successful program for us at TCS. It actually blossomed into something we call the Future Athlete Project. I'm actually a member of the Future Athlete Project. I've had a digital twin of my own heart created, and another just great example of how this technology can not only improve the performance of professional athletes like Des, but improve the performance of everyday athletes like myself, and ultimately elevate the health and wellness of society at large. So that project, that digital twin project, kind of caused us at TCS to take another look at where the future might be headed for marathons more broadly, not just within the context of athletic performance, but how do we look at the future of marathons and recognize that pressure that is being put on marathons today, and leveraging various technologies to be able to take some of that pressure off and to create new systems that allow us to make marathons, as we like to say, safer, smarter, and more sustainable. And so I'm not going to dive into all of these, but we'll take a look at just a few of these technologies, and it will allow us to think about how they might be applied. The first one we'll start with is city-scale digital twins.
It's hard to make decisions about important things if you can't somehow simulate the outcome. Climate change is a social matter, a human matter, a global matter of extraordinary levels. How do we decide what strategies and decisions that we make, what is going to work and by when, and how much? The answer is to have a simulation of the Earth, and that's sufficiently high fidelity that you could test various mitigation and adaptation strategies at a regional level.
So that was Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, and what they're doing is creating a digital twin of the Earth, again, so that they can start allowing smart folks in the scientific community to create these simulations, run these simulations, and understand those trade-offs. And I think that's a really big part of this, is understanding the trade-offs. And so as we think about being able to apply that same technology to a marathon and running a city scale digital twin, a scaled down version of what he talked about, it's really being able to move marathon planning from this, sort of static race day plans to be able to, before the event ever occurs, to run simulations and stress test the operations before any of those problems become visible. And so when we think about that, we ask ourselves, what are the upsides and the downsides to something like that? So obviously, the ability to get ahead of problems, to improve our coordination with the cities, maximize and really create a force multiplier for our staff and our volunteers. But there's also downsides that we need to think about as well. Does it give us a sense of false confidence in a way that we're not preparing for things that might be blind spots? A lot of infrastructural shared city data, so it's not going to be available to everybody. If you're an event planner in a smaller city, that might not be available to you. But it allows us to ask questions like, could we start to optimize for our best day, rehearse for those worst days, and ultimately improve the runner and spectator experience, even if we experience pressures that aren't optimal on race day. So the next one is energy harvesting pavement.
Energy harvesting pavement is one of the most exciting technologies that will improve the sustainability of marathons. It creates a circular system of power generation and power capture, creating a self-sustaining loop of motion and momentum.
So of course, sustainability is, a huge issue that any event needs to be looking at and thinking about. And so, could we use this technology? And we're already starting to see kind of prototypes of this used in marathons around the world. Really exciting to see. Could we start to make the race course itself not an energy consumer, but an energy contributor, and put energy back onto the grid by having thousands or tens of thousands of runners run over this energy harvesting pavement? And, could we power course infrastructure, signal climate leadership in a really big and meaningful way, and create value for sponsors in a way that we haven't been able to before? Downsides, potentially high upfront cost. Again, there's opportunities to create using the ecosystem of technology providers, sponsors, and race organizers a way to offset a lot of those costs, but something that needs to be thought about. Certainly adds complexity to the whole system as well. But like a lot of these technologies, that gets better and better over time. So that's really asking the question, where should we be investing in that visible sustainability, so that we can, avoid technology that looks better than it performs, but also be able to show performance in really actionable and tangible ways to spectators and to racers themselves. All right, next, circular hydration pods.
Circular hydration pods are the answer to one of the biggest challenges with races today, which are cups and bottles being thrown out along the race course. And these pods can either be consumed along with the liquid or simply tossed aside where they'll decompose along the road. These pods are biodegradable, often sourced from local materials, and leave no trace if they're discarded.
Relatively new to the marathoning game. I live in Colorado here in the US, and I spend most of my time mountain biking and cycling. And in those events, you just, you carry your trash with you. That's just the expectation. And obviously that's not possible during marathons. And I was surprised, I guess, at the amount of cups and so on that get thrown along the course and the amount of cleanup that's required. And so, something like circular hydration pods really have the ability to sustain and hydrate runners along the course in a much more sustainable way. So cutting waste, speeding aid stations, not having to have so many volunteers along the course to pour cups of water and to shuttle water around and so forth. Again, that opportunity to turn sustainability into visual action on behalf of the race organizers. Now, some of the downsides, there's going to be a learning curve to this. Runners, understanding what these things are, how they should use them, how they should think about their hydration strategy as these are made available to them. A lot of complexity that will need to be sorted out there. But is it a way that we can really improve the runner experience instead of creating another operational burden that we're dealing with? All right, another one is augmented reality spectator layer. Let's have a look.
Another technology that's going to be transformative for marathons is the augmented reality spectator experience. Spectators wearing lightweight augmented reality glasses will be able to track runners throughout the course. And if you're looking for loved ones on the course, they'll be instantly highlighted as they approach, allowing you to quickly identify them and cheer them on as they pass by.
So as we all know, big events like marathons are not the best spectator experience, in the sense that, you see the elite runners sort of come and go, and then, you may or may not be able to know how the race plays out for them going forward, depending on, your access to, screens and so on to see how that race plays out, or to be able to spot your loved one as they come up in the massive crowd as they're coming up and going by. So could this really allow us to better track how those elite runners are performing, and to be able to see where our loved one is or somebody that we're cheering for along the race course and spot them and identify them much easier? So a way to really deepen fan engagement, highlight more runners as they come by, expand the media inventory. So as we have media partners involved in this, do we have the opportunity to give them more in-depth and interesting views into the race? The downside to that is, are we going to exclude those that don't have this technology available to them along the race course? Does it become a distraction instead of an addition? And also this idea of commercializing runner data. Is there a sort of data integrity and privacy issues that we need to think about as well? So the question really is, could we create a richer viewing experience while at the same time not taking away from that human experience that for anybody who's, you know, stood along a race course really understands the power of just the human connection of seeing runners running along the race course and the emotion that evokes. And then finally, the last one we'll look at is waste sorting robot.
A technology that's really going to positively impact the sustainability of marathons is waste sorting robotics. Autonomous AI-powered robots will patrol the race course equipped with cameras, LiDAR, and mechanical arms. And these AI models will be trained on millions of images of waste objects and be able to identify and sort compostables, recyclables, and landfill materials with incredible accuracy.
So really a way to, again, show visible sustainability at these events, as well as create a massive force multiplier in terms of the staff and volunteers that we need to have involved in the waste pickup and sorting process. So, you know, improving the cleanup workload, showing that live sustainability, you know, but do we add more complexity? Is there more vendor dependence? You know, do we now start needing to show more proof of sustainability and what ends up happening to all of that material on the back end? So can we start to make this really a live operation that happens in real time versus something that gets done after the fact, after the public has already seen, again, all those cups and bottles scattered along the race course? So as we wrap up today and think about the future of marathons, the future of mass participation events, the question then is, you know, what do we do with this? How do we start to think about this? And these are just a few of the ways that I think we can really start to change our thinking, right? Really, you know, challenge the status quo, connect the dots to try and draw new conclusions, be endlessly curious, be creative and a continuous learner. And at the end of the day, use all of this information to think differently. And the biggest part of that is, I'll take us back to the beginning of the conversation, this notion that the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read or write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn, and do that over and over again throughout our lives and throughout our careers. So with that, I'll say thanks very much. Really enjoyed being with you all today. Would love to continue the conversation on LinkedIn. You can scan that QR code and connect to me, or just go direct to that link as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bill. So many great ideas and insights there, and that key part that you left us with in the end there, the power and ability to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, going to be clearly valuable for us as individuals and as an industry as we go forward. Thanks again for making the time. Sorry, folks, there were some hitches with the audio there, but hopefully you were able to get by with the subtitles that were on those audio clips. And thanks again for those great insights, Bill. As we move on to our final segment, and this takes us back to, as I said at the top of the show, this amazing day that we had in London. Delighted to welcome Joshua Rowe, who's the head of sports tech at Merton, and he's going to take us through a short presentation, When Plans Gel Perfectly, how nutrition tech fueled Solway's sub-2 marathon.
My name, is Josh Rowe, and I'm head of sports tech at Morton. And today I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the events and really kind of what went into the London 2026 kind of marathon performance, especially with Sebastian Sawe. And then also just kind of give a bit of a conversation around the debate of, like, is it got to be the shoes or is it the gels or both? And I think me being here discussing this really highlights that there's been a big shift in that argument now, and that really it's not really about either or. It's how they both really complement each other and are really kind of important assets for marathon performance. I think it's really, before we really go into the technology, I think it's really important to really just highlight that technology really isn't really relatively useful if it's not put into the hands of people that aren't able to harness it. And I think there's a lot of talk about like technology, but really when we go down to the fundamentals, like what Sebastian himself and his coach Claudio was able to do and achieved is insanely impressive, and it shouldn't be kind of understated. Yes, technology kind of played a part, but it takes really incredible kind of humans to really drive and get these kind of performances out. I think when we talk about the events of London 2026, we have to really go back to kind of what was the catalyst of maybe one of these events, and it really takes us to 2017 in May, and people might be aware of the kind of the Breaking Two project, and it was really the emergence of, say, the Eliud Kipchoge era, but also of that there was a birth of a new innovation which really kind of took over the event and the discussion kind of going forward within marathon running there to this date, really. And yeah, it's the shoes. And I think again there's a lot of conversations around the shoe technology, and it's almost very well worth the kind of praise and the discussions they get. Like, it's shown with this advancements in technology, they've shown to improve, as you say, running economy, better energy return from the foam, and then also the general kind of improved kind of fatigue resistance, which all kind of really links back down to kind of relative improved performance. And what we've seen through these kind of past recent years is this kind of innovation both within shoe technology and within apparel as kind of really kind of heightened and accelerated. And I was really fortunate to kind of really see a little bit behind the scenes of how Adidas kind of did some of the innovation work around the shoe technology, and it's really impressive to see the kind of level of detail that goes into kind of creating these sorts of products. But if we go back to the events of 2017, there was also another innovation that was kind of came out into the fold, and it was the kind of the innovation of fueling and hydrogel technology. And relatively at the time, this Maurten and nutrition was not really something that was heavily discussed or talked about. Maybe one, because Maurten didn't really have the marketing and prowess as of other kind of competing companies, but then also the kind of, it wasn't really kind of fully aware of like how the importance of nutrition was from an elite practitioner perspective. That awareness has already been there, always been there, but from an elite perspective to the everyday athlete, this is something that's kind of grown over the years. And yeah, it's very much one of the major kind of components that really has led to this kind of innovation within the nutrition industry, has been the development of the hydrogel technology. But the question is why is nutrition had to evolve? Why has there been requirement of innovation in these recent years within the nutrition space? And it relatively comes down to there was very much a fueling for performance paradox, in the sense of the scientific evidence has really showed that having aggressive fueling plans and really having high carbohydrate intakes during endurance sports led to an improved performance. But the issue with that was that traditionally ingesting carbohydrates in traditional form led to significant GI issues. So there was a bit of a paradox where athletes, and even the everyday athletes, knew that in fueling during the likes of, say, events like a marathon was important, but also they would potentially have increased risks of getting GI issues, which could have a negative impact on the performance. And this is where Maurten kind of came into the fold with the hydrogel technology. Initially, it was very much developed to improve the dental enamel of the mouth. So because of the really kind of sugary drinks and gels, it kind of also can have a negative impact on dental enamel. And the developed the products to really try to harness and be able to have a product that would be more beneficial for athletes long term without having a significant impact. And Maurten was very successful in that. But then what they also identified from the product and the technology is that because how it delivers and protects the carbohydrates, it means that it can also improve the delivery and the uptake efficiency of the carbohydrates, whilst reducing the GI issues. And the technology comes from the medical industry, and what a hydrogel is it's classed as a three-dimensional hydrophilic polymer that can swell and hold large amounts of water while maintaining its structure. But overall, what that means is it's a pH sensitive natural product that's able to kind of deliver carbohydrates more efficiently and effectively through the GI tract where they can be absorbed. And this is really just a video demonstrating the effects or how the hydrogel technology works. So when you ingest a gel or a drink, traditionally it goes into the stomach. Your stomach is really acidic, so it has low pH. And when you kind of bind that with, say, traditional kind of sports nutritional products that have, say, are acidic and kind of low pH, it creates a kind of a volatile environment. And what the Morton hydrogel technology does is when it enters the stomach, as soon as it enters that the gastric environment and there's the low pH, it creates this three-dimensional structure. And what that means is then it's encapsulating the carbohydrates in this hydrogel. And here's just another demonstration of relatively how it works. You get your carbohydrate molecules. When they're relatively kind of separated, once you ingest them, they enter the gastric environment of the stomach. The hydrogel forms, creates this three-dimensional structure. And then once it goes into the small intestines where there's a shift in pH, so the small intestines, they're less acidic. The hydrogel is then designed to release, and it'll degrade and release the carbohydrates for absorption, uptake. And what that relatively means is that it's able to deliver the carbohydrates a lot more effectively. And again, the technology comes from the medical industry. It's classed as a drug delivery system. And what Morton have really been effective in been doing is able to harness this, within a sporting context. We've done lots of research, both on looking at the exogenous oxidation uptake and how the hydrogel kind of forms in the stomach, both in rest and during exercise. And really, this is just an MRI to really show that when you ingest a hydrogel, we see that this three-dimensional structure is formed, which creates this kind of protective environment of the carbohydrates, which allows it to be delivered more effectively through the GI tract. And then also we have data really to show that when you ingest carbohydrates in hydrogel form compared to traditional carbohydrate, we get an increase in gastric emptying. So it means it stays, it leaves the stomach at a quicker rate. And really the best way to describe it is how the Kenyans describe it is very much the disappearing drink and the disappearing gels. And that's because of the improved delivery of the carbohydrates and because of that three-dimensional structure of the hydrogel, it means you don't get the gravitational load. So from when you're running up and down, you don't feel the kind of the sweltering around of the fluid. And then also because of, say, the increase in gastric emptying, it means that it goes to the places it's required to at a quicker rate. And really, since 2017, Morton have gone on to fuel every world major marathon winner, both male and female, and also Olympic and world champion. And so it really shows that, and the kind of not only just from the data perspective in the lab, but the validation of the technology within the field itself. And again, what we've seen now is how the marathon is run. There's been a big transition in terms of how athletes tackle the marathon, and the nutrition is kind of one element that's is vital for the athletes to be able to compete and perform at the rate they do now. Also, one element that's really kind of been advanced in recent years is the optimization of the nutritional protocols. So this is I did a series of tests when I'd go out to Kenya to visit the camp and visit Claudio and Sebastian. And what we're doing here is he would ingest a carbohydrate drink and we would label it with vectin C and isotopic label. And what we're able to do then is capture through the breath his uptake of the drink and able to optimize and understand how his body's metabolizing the carbohydrates. So we're really starting to get in this era of really understanding individually how each athlete is able to metabolize and utilize carbohydrates and then prescribe a very precise nutritional plan, both on race day, but then also be able to prescribe them a good training plan and a nutritional plan in the marathon build-up phase to optimize both, not just their training, but also for the race day itself. And this is really just to really highlight that this shift in the recent years. This is just an image of us preparing the drinks in the days on the Saturday, the day before the marathon, and this is something that's turned into very much an event and a bit more of like a ritual for the elite athletes in the days leading up. Traditionally, all athletes have always had the option to be able to hand in their own kind of race day nutrition. And really before, say, 2016 and really kind of prior to the early 2000s, it was never really something that was deemed as important or taken that serious. So it's something for which was maybe driven by the coaches or the managers. But now, if you go to any world major marathon and the elite athlete hotel, this is something that's more of a serious event where there's a curfew when the athletes need to hand in their nutrition. And it really just highlights the importance of how nutrition plays an important role within the marathon and within the sport itself now. And this really is just to demonstrate that this is Sebastian taking his nutrition at 40K. Traditionally, this was always a fueling station which was deemed as relatively little important. But what we're seeing now is because of how aggressive athletes are really tackling the marathon, nutrition is required continuously throughout. And again, what's really nice about this moment is that Sebastian was very much in a high performance, high competitive race at this point, and he still managed. He knew the importance of his nutrition, even though he had less than 6 minutes to 5.5 minutes left of running. He still took the time to get his nutrition in to be able to kind of finish the race. And I think it's also really important to really highlight that when we compare nutrition to the shoes, I say it's not one or the other. They both play an important role. And more recently, we're really starting to see that having a really high carbohydrate intake is not only beneficial from an energy strategy perspective, but also becomes a more beneficial strategy from an economical perspective. So when your body's utilizing predominantly carbohydrates as a fuel source, and when you're having aggressive carbohydrate intake, it can improve actually your running economy. So when we talk about the carbon shoes and the importance that's had, it's shown to have an improvement of your running economy from 2 to 4%. If not more, with the recent shoes. It's the same with having an aggressive carbohydrate intake. It's shown to go from 60 grams of carbohydrates to 120, shown to have a 3% improvement in your running economy. Plus, with the additional energy availability, it shows that this is why athletes are able to kind of tackle the marathon as it is now. And again, I think it's really just to highlight that, yeah, the shoes really provide that kind of that low cost of each stride, the kind of high carbohydrate availability, and keeps more energy available in the latter stage of the race. And really what this allows the athletes to do is, as they have more freedom to really be more aggressive with the races itself. And again, if we look at how the marathon was traditionally run within the elites, it was very much a get to 30K, and then it was who could really survive the last 10 to 12K, and it was really battle of nutrition. Whereas now, it's changed. It's more about athletes get to 30K, and that's relative when the race starts and when they kind of run the fastest times. And this again comes from this new innovation of the technology allowing the athletes to really tackle the marathon. The grand scheme of things, energy availability isn't a problem anymore within the marathon. If athletes are able to get sufficient amount of carbohydrates in, then they're able. The energy is not the problem. And this is what we're seeing now with the big increases in more marathon times. There's also been an innovation within additional innovation, which is in the likes of the bicarb system. And this is traditionally, it's very much seen as something that's for the shorter endurance events, like you say, for the power-based events like the middle distance athletes. But what we're seeing is that the with the likes of a product like this, it started to kind of come into the fold within the long distance events. And again, that really comes down to the athletes being able to be more aggressive. So again, like when we talk about bicarb, it had relatively a similar performance paradox in the sense of it was there was almost 40 to 50 years worth of research showing that ingestion of sodium bicarbonate can improve an athlete's performance, but there was also a significant a large amount of the research showing that sodium bicarbonate can have a very adverse effects on the GI tract and cause a lot of GI issues, even more than the ingestion of say traditional carbohydrate drinks. So what we did at Morn is really try to harness the hydrogel technology and be able to deliver a more effective and efficient way of the bicarb system, and to be able to allow athletes to get purely the performance benefits without getting any of the negative benefits. And what we really see is since the introduction of the bicarb system, we've seen a big influx in race times, both in the middle distance events for the females. And a big kind of element to this is the introduction of the bicarb system. This is the same for the males. So when we look at just as one distance as the 800, we've done the same for the 15s and the 3Ks and the 5s. But if we look at the introduction since the bicarb, it's had a significant effect on the times athletes are running. And this is just the top level times. But then when we look at the broader range from national to regional to kind of local, the people that are kind of utilizing the bicarb system very systematically, both in training and racing, are getting significant EBIT great performances. And again, what I'm just ready to show is that when we think about a product like this, it falls within this kind of like power endurance and continuum. And very much we know that carbohydrates play a critical role within the endurance sports. And during the sports kind of lasting from 60 minutes to less, that the sodium bicarb can have a great potential to improve the athlete's performance. But what we're also seeing now, and as I say with the evidence from London this year, is that if athletes are fully fueled and they're able to have an aggressive nutritional plan, then they're able to continue to exercise a higher velocity and intensity, which then allows the ergogenic effects of the bicarb to kind of come into effect itself. So when we're looking at the nutritional plans now for the elite athletes, we're actually embedding these kind of products within the nutritional protocol, and we're seeing that they're actually having a very positive effect. And again, coming back to just the argument between, say, the shoes, the carbohydrate products, and the fueling. And then I think when we add in like the bicarb system itself, what it really does is it just helps the athletes kind of tolerate that metabolic stress at high intensity efforts. And sorry, and that's again, we saw at the events of London, there was at one point 22 miles. The Sebastian Cadelcha, they were running at 4:24 minute per mile. So it shows that the intensity and the speed and the fluctuation in pace, it really having something like this more bicarb system improves the kind of the stability of the acid-base balance, which allows athletes to kind of has a bit of more freedom to be more aggressive with the race. And I think it's again, just going back to Ray, just to finish up, is yes, we've done a lot of kind of innovation within the space, like within all and within the shoe technology. But I think what's really been telling about this story is that it all still comes down to the athletes, and we're now in a state where the aftermath of the London Marathon has really transcended the sport, and I think this is what's a really nice kind of way is that when we focus on kind of high performance and these very kind of major kind of moonshot opportunities, it's something that really can kind of transform the sport. And that's kind of where we're at now. And we're in a very much a new era of marathon running. And it's been really interesting kind of hearing some of the talks about for what happens for the everyday athlete. And I think that's kind of where we're at now is like we're in an exciting part not just for the elites and what's happening at the top end, but also for the kind of the everyday athlete as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Josh. Fascinating insights, and like you say, a new era, not only at the elite level, but at the recreational level. I loved one of the comments you made, freedom to be more aggressive. I guess that augurs for some really exciting racing as these athletes have more freedom to be aggressive in the final stages of the race, like what we saw in London. So, folks, that's the pretty much time to wrap it all up. A big thanks again there, Josh. Thank you to those of you, close to 100 of us that have stayed the distance, which has ended up being closer to 3 hours. We had over 500 people registered tonight. Wonderful turnout from all over the world. A big thanks to our speakers. Some great content there. As I shared at the top of the show, we have recorded and we've also been live streaming on the MPW Facebook page. There was a hitch on the YouTube channel, but we will post it there. We will share the decks, and we will look forward to hopefully seeing you on the 9th of September, which is our next one. Mark that date in your diary now. We will be in touch with details in due course, but in the meantime, a huge thank you for those of you that joined late and don't know me. I'm Chris Robb. I'm the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. I saw Alessio come on camera there. Alessio, was there something that you wanted to say to wrap it up?
No, really, just thank all speakers and participants, and see you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alessio. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great evening. Rest well. Good day, good morning for those of you that have joined us from across the other side of the world. We had many of you joining from East Coast, US and Canada. So we really have spanned the globe. And thank you so much for staying with us. Look forward to seeing you. And in the meantime, anything that I can help with, be in touch and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.